Jack Monroe had fixed thousands of engines in his life, but he'd never worked faster than he did that gray morning when the young nurse's car broke down on Harbor Road. His weathered hands moved with practiced precision while she paced behind him, checking her phone every few seconds. Something about her urgency reminded him of his late wife, the way Sarah used to rush out the door when the hospital called, always carrying someone else's emergency on her shoulders. The woman introduced herself as Elena, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. She kept saying she had to get to the hospital, that the president's wife had been in a terrible car accident and was fighting for her life. Jack understood that feeling of carrying the weight of someone else's crisis. He'd spent years fixing things for people who couldn't wait, broken heaters in winter, dead batteries before job interviews. As he handed Elena her keys, she pressed a business card into his palm and said something about calling her if he ever needed anything. What Jack didn't know was that saving the First Lady's life would earn Elena a presidential commendation, and she would never forget the gentle stranger who helped her reach the hospital in time. How do you tell a man that his simple act of kindness helped save the most important patient in the country? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The salt air of Milbrook Harbor carried stories in its breeze tailies of fishermen who'd braved storms for generations, of families who'd weathered economic downturns and seasonal hurricanes, of a community that understood the rhythm of tides and the patience required to live by the sea. Jack Monroe had become part of that rhythm 3 years ago, though he'd never intended to stay this long. The town stretched along a curved bay where weathered docks jutted into gray-green waters. Painted, clapboard houses climbed the hillsides, in faded blues and yellows, their colors muted by decades of coastal weather. Harbor Road wound through the heart of it all, connecting the working waterfront to the residential streets where children rode bicycles and elderly couples tended small gardens behind white picket fences. Jack's morning routine had become as predictable as the tide. Schedule posted outside Chun's Market. Wake at 6:30, coffee black and strong. Checked the weather from his kitchen window that overlooked the harbor. By 7:15, he'd have 7-year-old Lily dressed and fed, her unruly brown curls temporarily tamed into pigtails that would be askew again by lunchtime. "Daddy, can we get a dog?" Lily asked every morning as they walked the 8 blocks to Milbrook Elementary, her small hand tucked into his calloused palm. Every morning, Jack gave her the same gentle deflection. "Maybe someday, sweetheart." The truth was more complicated. A dog meant roots, commitment, the assumption that they'd stay in one place long enough to train a puppy and watch it grow old. Jack still thought of Milbrook Harbor as temporary. Despite the 3 years that had passed since Sarah's funeral, the elementary school sat on a rise overlooking the harbor, its red brick facade and tall windows giving it the dignified air of a building that had educated generations of local children. Principal Martinez always stood by the front entrance during morning drop-off, greeting parents and students with the kind of genuine warmth that small-town educators specialized in. She'd taken a particular interest in Lily, perhaps sensing the careful way Jack maintained distance from other parents, the polite but guarded responses he gave to invitations for coffee or weekend barbecues. "She's doing beautifully in reading," Principal Martinez had told him just last week. "Mrs. Patterson says she's already moved up to the advanced group. Sarah would be so proud." Jack appreciated that people still mentioned Sarah naturally, without the awkward pauses or pitying looks that had followed them from their old life in Portland. Here, she existed in present tense, would be proud, would have loved the autumn leaves, would have insisted on volunteering for the school's holiday concert. It helped Lily understand that her mother wasn't gone, just somewhere else, still caring about homework and scraped knees, and the way her daughter's laugh could fill a room. After dropping Lily off, Jack would make his rounds through town. Tuesday, meant checking on Mrs. Chun's temperamental freezer unit at the market. Wednesday was lawn mower repair for the Hendersons, whose ancient craftsmen had been limping through summers for the better part of a decade. Thursday brought him to the harbor, where Captain Burke's lobster boat needed constant attention to its finicky diesel engine. The work was steady, but modest. Nothing like the thriving auto shop he'd once owned in Portland, where he'd employed 6 mechanics and handled everything from oil changes to complete engine rebuilds. That life had ended the night Sarah died, when he'd realized he couldn't bear to stay in a place where every street corner held a memory. Every familiar face carried the weight of shared grief. His current setup was humble, a single bay garage behind the small rental house he shared with Lily, equipped with basic tools and whatever parts he could salvage or order when budgets allowed. Most days brought enough work to cover rent and groceries, with a little left over for Lily's dance classes at Mrs. C. Rodriguez's studio on Harbor Street. Sarah's stethoscope lay wrapped in tissue paper in his bedroom dresser, beneath worn flannel, shirts, and a few old photographs. He'd packed it when they left Portland, though he couldn't say exactly why. Perhaps because it represented the part of her that had saved lives, the skilled hands that had guided him through their courtship with. The same gentle confidence she'd brought to emergency medicine. Sometimes, late at night, when Lily was asleep, he'd hold it and remember the sound of Sarah's heart through the earpieces, the steady rhythm that had once promised them a lifetime together. The people of Milbrook Harbor had accepted them with the kind of quiet generosity that coastal communities understood, help offered without fanfare, friendship extended without pressure. Mrs. Chun slipped extra fruit into Lily's lunch bag and pretended not to notice. The librarian, Miss Foster, saved new children's books for Lily and created reading challenges that kept her engaged through long winter evenings. Captain Burke paid Jack slightly more than necessary for boat repairs and claimed it was because his work was better than those city mechanics anyway. Jack appreciated their kindness while maintaining careful boundaries. He attended parent-teacher conferences and school concerts, helped with community cleanup days when asked, contributed casseroles to church potlucks, though he rarely stayed to eat them. He was present but peripheral, grateful but guarded, a man, still learning how to live in a world that had continued turning after his had stopped. Lily, however, had embraced their new home with the adaptability that children possess in abundance. She knew every shop owner by name, could identify different fishing boats by their silhouettes, and had appointed herself unofficial greeter for any tourists brave enough to visit Milbrook Harbor during the off-season. Her resilience amazed Jack daily the way she spoke about Portland as when we lived there before, rather than home. The matter-of-fact way she included Sarah in present-day conversations without sadness. The unconscious trust she placed in the world's basic goodness. Despite having lost her mother at age 4, Mama would like the seals. She'd announced one afternoon when they'd spotted a group sunning themselves on the harbor rocks. She always said animals were good judges of character. Jack had simply nodded, though privately he wondered how Sarah would have handled Lily's growing independence, her questions about why other children had mothers who picked them up from school, her occasional nightmares about being left alone. The garage where Jack worked was a converted barn that came with a rental house, its wide doors facing the alley behind Maple Street. The previous tenant had used it for storage, leaving behind shelves lined with mason jars, full of rusty screws and folded newspapers from decades past. Jack had cleared most of it out, keeping only what seemed useful, creating a workspace that was functional if not fancy. On quiet afternoons, when no urgent repairs demanded his attention, Jack would stand in the doorway and watch the harbor through. The gap between neighboring houses. The water changed color throughout the day, steel gray in early morning, deep blue under afternoon sun, nearly black as evening approached. Fishing boats moved in predictable patterns, their captains navigating by instinct and decades of experience. It was a peaceful view, one that helped him understand why people chose to build lives in places where the horizon stretched unbroken toward possibilities they couldn't quite name. That morning, the morning Elena's car had broken down on Harbor Road, Jack had been particularly aware of the harbor's changing moods. A storm system was moving in from the northeast, bringing the kind of steady rain that would keep tourists away and give locals an excuse to linger over coffee at the diner. The air had that heavy quality that preceded weather changes, making him think of Sarah's ability to predict storms hours before they arrived. She'd attributed it to medical training reading, the subtle signs that indicated change was coming. He'd been thinking about Sarah when Elena's small sedan had sputtered to a stop just past the intersection with Harbor Road. The young woman who'd emerged from the driver's seat had possessed the same focused intensity that Jack remembered from emergency room visits during Lily's childhood illnesses, that particular urgency of medical professionals who understood that minutes could mean the difference between life and death. Elena had been striking in her panic, dark hair escaping from a hastily assembled ponytail, scrubs wrinkled as though she'd dressed quickly. Her hands had shaken slightly as she described the problem with her car, but her voice had remained steady and clear. Jack had recognized the discipline required to maintain composure under pressure, the training that allowed medical personnel to function effectively even when every instinct screamed for haste. As he'd worked on her engine, checking connections and testing systems with the methodical approach that 25 years of mechanical work had ingrained, Jack had found himself remembering Sarah's similar focus during crises. The way she'd moved through their home during Lily's midnight fevers, gathering supplies and taking temperatures with swift efficiency. The calm authority in her voice when she'd called doctors or administered children's medicine with precise dosages. Elena's urgency had been infectious, making Jack work faster than usual, while maintaining the careful attention to detail that separated good mechanics from merely adequate ones. Her car had needed a new alternator belt and minor electrical work, nothing complicated, but requiring the right tools and steady hands. As he'd made the repairs, she'd paced nearby, checking her phone and muttering updates about traffic patterns and estimated arrival times. When he'd handed her the keys, their fingers had touched briefly, and Jack had been surprised by the small jolt of recognition, not that he knew her, but that he understood her. The weight she carried, the responsibility that drove her forward, the careful balance between professional competence and personal vulnerability. The business card she'd pressed into his palm had been simple, white cardstock with elegant blue lettering. Elena Reyes, RN, Mercy General Hospital. Below her name, a phone number, an email address, nothing more. But something in the way she'd looked at him as she'd driven away had suggested the card meant more than a casual exchange of information. Now, hours later, Jack stood in his garage, doorway watching rain begin to streak the windows of neighboring houses. Lily would be starting her afternoon math lesson, probably fidgeting in her seat, as she always did when the weather made the classroom feel smaller. In a few hours, he'd walk to the school for pickup, and they'd hurry home through the rain, Lily chattering about her day, while Jack listened with the careful attention that single parenthood had taught him was precious and fleeting. He pulled Elena's business card from his shirt pocket, studying the clean lines of her name. Somewhere across town, she was likely saving lives at Mercy General, using the skills that had made her morning emergency so urgent. Jack had helped her reach that emergency, had played some small part in whatever medical crisis had demanded her immediate attention. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine calling the number on the card, not because of any emergency, but simply to ask if she'd successfully reached the hospital in time. The thought felt both natural and terrifying, a small step toward the kind of connection he'd avoided since Sarah's death. The rain began falling harder, drumming against the garage roof with increasing intensity. Jack tucked the business card back into his pocket and returned to work. But Elena's urgency lingered in his memory, mixing with thoughts of Sarah, and the strange way that morning encounters could echo through an entire day, leaving ripples that wouldn't settle until long. After the stones had sunk from sight, the first sign that something was wrong came at 3:45, when Jack arrived at Milbrook Elementary to find the usual cluster of parents waiting under umbrellas, but no sign of Lily among the children streaming through the red doors. He checked his watch, thinking perhaps he'd arrived early, but the steady flow of students indicated dismissal was well underway. Jack approached Mrs. Patterson, Lily's second-grade teacher, who was helping younger children locate their rides. "Excuse me, have you seen Lily?" "She's usually one of the first ones out." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted from distracted efficiency to immediate concern. "Mr. Monroe, Lily left early today. The office called for her around 2:30. I assumed you'd arranged for pickup." A cold sensation spread through Jack's chest, entirely separate from the October chill. "I didn't arrange anything. Who picked her up?" "I'm not sure. The office would have the details." Mrs. Patterson was already moving toward the building, her usual calm replaced by the urgency that school personnel reserve for situations involving children's safety. Inside the administrative office, Principal Martinez was on the phone, but she gestured Jack toward her desk the moment she saw his face. She concluded her call quickly and turned to him with the kind of focused attention that Jack had learned meant serious trouble. "Mr. Monroe, we've been trying to reach you. Lily wasn't picked up early. She never made it to afternoon classes. We called when we realized she was missing from roll call after lunch recess." The words seemed to echo from somewhere far away. Jack's phone, which he'd left in his truck while working on an engine repair, had 5 missed calls from the school's number. "She was here this morning. I dropped her off myself." "Yes, she attended all her morning classes. But after lunch, when?" "The children came back from the playground." Principal Martinez paused, choosing her words carefully. "One of the crossing guards, Mrs. Sullivan, saw a child who looked like Lily walking toward Harbor Road around 2 o'clock. She thought it was odd, but assumed there was a family emergency." Jack's hands were shaking now, a careful control he'd maintained for 3 years beginning to fracture. Harbor Road leads away from school. Why would she? "We've already called the police. Officer Reynolds is coordinating a search, and we have staff members checking the usual places children might go: the library, the park, the harbor area." The next hour passed in fragments. Jack walking the route between school and home, calling Lily's name into the gray afternoon. Parents joining the search, spreading through downtown Milbrook Harbor with the grim efficiency of people who understood that time mattered. Mrs. Chun closing her market early to help. Captain Burke organizing boat owners to check the waterfront. Officer Reynolds, a veteran of the force who'd grown up in Milbrook Harbor and knew every family's history, found Jack outside the post office around 4:30, the expression on. His weathered face made Jack's stomach clench with anticipation of words he didn't want to hear. "Jack, we found her." The relief lasted only seconds before Reynolds continued. "She's at Mercy General. There was an accident on Harbor Road, about 3 blocks from where you helped that nurse this morning. Hit and run. A motorist found her and called for an ambulance." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of rain-slicked streets and traffic lights that seemed to take forever to change. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel while his mind refused to process what he'd been told. Lily at the hospital. Hit and run. The same stretch of road where he'd spent his morning fixing Elena's car, where life had seemed manageable and predictable. Just hours before, Mercy General Hospital occupied a sprawling complex on the outskirts of town, its modern emergency wing a sharp contrast to the older buildings that housed other departments. Jack had been here only once before, 3 years ago when they'd first arrived in Milbrook Harbor, and Lily had needed stitches after falling from her bicycle. That visit had been routine, almost casual, a father tending to his daughter's scraped knee while she chattered about the adventure of riding without training wheels. This arrival felt entirely different. Jack burst through the automatic doors into a waiting area filled with the controlled chaos of emergency medicine nurses moving with purposeful urgency. Overhead pages calling doctors to various departments, the distinctive smell of antiseptic, and floor wax that seemed universal to hospitals everywhere dot at the reception desk. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes and efficient hands looked up as Jack approached. "I'm Jack Monroe. My daughter, Lily Monroe, was brought in from a car accident." "Yes, Mr. Monroe. She's in Trauma Room 3. Dr. Harrison is with her now, and—" The receptionist paused, consulting her computer screen. "Nurse Reyes is her primary care nurse. I'll let them know you're here." Elena. The name hit Jack like a physical blow, the morning's encounter suddenly taking on new significance. The woman he'd helped reach the hospital in time to save the president's wife was now caring for his daughter. The strange coincidence of their connection deepening into something that felt like fate. The receptionist led him through double doors into the treatment area, where the sounds of medical equipment and urgent conversations created a symphony of controlled emergency. Trauma Room 3 occupied a corner space, its glass walls offering a view that Jack wasn't prepared for. His small daughter lying unconscious on a hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and 4 lines, her usually animated face still and pale against. White pillows. Elena stood beside the bed, checking readings on various machines with the same focused competence she'd displayed that morning when her car had broken down. She looked up as Jack entered, and he saw recognition flicker across her features, followed immediately by professional compassion. "Mr. Monroe, I'm Elena Reyes. We met this morning." Jack nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. Up close, Lily looked even smaller, her slight frame nearly lost among the medical equipment. A bandage covered part of her forehead, and her left arm was immobilized in a temporary splint. "How is she?" he managed to ask. Elena's voice carried the careful balance of honesty and hope that medical professionals used with frightened families. "She has a concussion and a broken arm, along with some bruised ribs. The MRI shows no brain bleeding, which is very good news. She's sedated right now, but her vital signs are stable." Dr. Harrison, a tall man with graying hair and gentle eyes, appeared at Jack's shoulder. "Mr. Monroe, I'm glad you're here. Lily is a very lucky little girl. The injuries could have been much worse. When will she wake up?" "We're keeping her sedated for now to help with pain management and to give her brain time to heal from the concussion. We'll gradually reduce the medication over the next 24 hours. She should be awake and alert by tomorrow afternoon." Jack moved closer to the bed, his hand hovering over Lily's uninjured arm before settling gently on her shoulder. She felt warm and solid beneath his palm, more real than the monitors and medical equipment that surrounded her. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths, and Jack found himself synchronizing his own breathing to match hers. "The police will want to speak with you when you're ready," Dr. Harrison continued. "They're still investigating the accident, trying to locate the vehicle that left the scene. Hit and run." The words carried implications that Jack couldn't fully process yet. Someone had struck his daughter and driven away, leaving her unconscious on Harbor Road while rain began to fall. The thought filled him with a rage so pure and overwhelming that he had to step back from Lily's bed, afraid that his anger might somehow contaminate the sterile environment where people were working to heal her dot. Elena seemed to sense his struggle. "Would you like some coffee? There's a family lounge just down the hall where we can talk about Lily's care plan." Jack looked back at his daughter, reluctant to leave her even for a moment. Elena understood his hesitation. "I'll ask one of the other nurses to stay with her. She won't be alone." The family lounge was a small room furnished with comfortable chairs and a coffee machine that had seen better days. Elena poured 2 cups and handed one to Jack, who accepted it gratefully despite his shaking hands. "This morning," Jack said, staring into his coffee, "when I helped you with your car, you were rushing to save someone's life. The president's wife. There was a car accident, and she needed emergency surgery. Your help getting my car running again. It made the difference between getting there in time and being too late." Jack nodded slowly, processing the strange symmetry. "And now, you're taking care of Lily." "It's not a coincidence I'm here. I volunteer for trauma cases involving children. My younger brother—" Elena paused, her professional composure wavering slightly. "He was injured in an accident when he was 8. I know what families go through." Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story, but Jack didn't press. Instead, he found himself studying Elena's face, noting the way her dark eyes reflected both competence and compassion, the careful way she held herself, as though ready to respond to crisis at any moment. "The business card you gave me this morning," Jack said, pulling it from his pocket. "I've been carrying it around all day, thinking about calling you." Elena looked at the slightly crumpled card, then back at Jack. "I'm glad you didn't need to use it for an emergency, but I do need it now." "Yes," she said simply, "you do." They returned to Trauma Room 3, where Lily continued sleeping peacefully despite the controlled activity around her. Other medical staff moved in and out, checking monitors and adjusting equipment with the quiet efficiency that Jack was beginning to recognize as the rhythm of hospital life. Elena resumed her position beside Lily's bed, making notes on a chart while keeping one eye on the various displays that tracked his daughter's condition. Jack settled into a chair positioned where he could see Lily's face, and began the long vigil that he suspected would stretch through the night dot at some point. Mrs. Chun arrived with a thermos of soup and fresh bread, pressing them into Jack's hands with the kind of wordless support that small communities offered during crises. Principal Martinez stopped by to check on Lily and bring a get-well card signed by her entire class. Captain Burke appeared briefly, his weather-beaten face creased with concern, offering to organize shifts of volunteers to sit with Lily so Jack could rest. Jack appreciated their kindness while feeling completely isolated by his fear. These were good people, friends who genuinely cared about his family's welfare, but none of them could change the fundamental reality that Lily lay unconscious in a hospital bed while someone who had injured her remained free and unidentified. As the evening deepened into night, the hospital settled into its quieter rhythm. Elena remained at her post, occasionally adjusting Lily's position or checking her responses, always moving with the gentle confidence that Jack had noticed that morning. Watching her work, he began to understand that her urgency earlier had been about more than professional duty. It was personal, driven by experiences that had taught her how precious and fragile life could be. Around midnight, when the only sounds were the soft beeping of monitors and the distant murmur of night shift activity, Elena approached Jack's chair. "You should try to get some sleep. I'll be here all night, and I promise I'll wake you if anything changes." Jack looked at his daughter's peaceful face, her features relaxed in medicated sleep. "I can't. What if she wakes up and I'm not here?" Elena nodded, understanding. "Then I'll stay close by. But Mr. Monroe, Jack, you're going to need your strength for the days ahead. Lily's recovery will take time, and she needs you to be at your best." She was right, of course, but sleep seemed impossible while his daughter lay injured, and his world felt fundamentally altered. The morning's simple routine coffee, breakfast, the walk to school already, seemed like memories from someone else's life. Now there would be medical appointments, physical therapy, insurance paperwork, and the ongoing investigation into who had struck Lily and driven away. Jack closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to gather the strength Elena had reminded him he would need. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear the ocean's rhythm, the same eternal tide that had drawn him to Milbrook Harbor 3 years ago, when he'd needed a place to heal from Sarah's death. Now, sitting beside his daughter's hospital bed, while a stranger-turned caregiver watched over them both, Jack realized that healing wasn't a destination, but an ongoing process, complicated by new wounds, even as old ones slowly mended. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight Lily was safe and breathing, cared for by someone who understood the weight of responsibility that medical emergencies carry. It would have to be enough. Dawn arrived gray and quiet at Mercy General, filtering through the trauma room windows with the pale light that hospitals seem to absorb rather than welcome. Jack had dozed fitfully in the bedside chair, his body cramped from maintaining the same position for hours, his mind cycling between fragments of dreams and the steady rhythm of Lily's breathing. Elena had kept her promise, remaining close throughout the night. Jack had watched her move between patients with the same careful attention she'd given his daughter, her soft-soled shoes silent on the polished floors, her voice low and reassuring when she spoke to other families facing their own medical crises. Around 3 in the morning, she'd brought him a blanket and a fresh cup of coffee, both gestures offered without comment, as though she understood that words could feel intrusive during the long hours of waiting. Now, as morning light slowly brightened the room, Lily began showing signs of emerging from the medicated sleep. Her eyelids fluttered, and she made small sounds that weren't quite words, but suggested consciousness returning. Jack leaned forward, his hand finding hers beneath the light hospital blanket. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "Daddy's here?" Lily's eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually finding his face. Her voice came out as a whisper, rusty from hours of sleep. "Daddy? My head hurts." Elena appeared at the bedside immediately, her presence both professional and comforting. "Hi, Lily. I'm Elena, one of your nurses. You're in the hospital because you had an accident, but you're going to be okay." Lily's gaze moved between Jack and Elena, confusion evident in her dark eyes. "I don't remember. Was I walking home from school?" Jack felt his throat tighten. The last thing he wanted was to burden his 7-year-old daughter with the details of what had happened to her. "You were hurt, but the doctors and nurses are taking very good care of you." "How do you feel?" "Sleepy, and my arm feels funny." Lily tried to lift her left arm, then noticed the splint and sling that immobilized it. "Is it broken?" Elena knelt beside the bed, bringing herself to Lily's eye level. "Yes, you have a broken arm, but it's going to heal perfectly. Dr. Harrison will probably put a real cast on it today, and you can choose what color you want." For the first time since waking, Lily showed a spark of interest. "Can I have purple?" "I think purple would be perfect," Elena said, smiling. "Would you like some ice chips? Your throat might be dry." As Elena helped Lily with small sips of water and ice chips, Jack marveled at her ability to make the hospital room feel less frightening. She explained each piece of equipment in terms that a 7-year-old could understand, turning the intimidating monitors and 4 lines into helpful friends. That were making sure Lily got better. Dr. Harrison arrived for morning rounds, his examination gentle but thorough, Lily's responses to his tests, following a penlight with her eyes, squeezing his hands, answering questions about her name and where she lived, indicated that the concussion was healing well. The broken arm would require a cast but no surgery, and the bruised ribs were painful but not dangerous. "When can I go home?" Lily asked, the question Jack had been afraid to voice. "Probably tomorrow, or the day after," Dr. Harrison replied. "We want to make sure your head injury is completely healed before you leave. But you're doing very well, Lily. You're a brave young lady." After the doctor left, Elena helped Lily with breakfast, small portions of toast and juice that seemed enormous to Jack, who hadn't eaten since the previous day. Watching his daughter take tentative bites, her appetite slowly returning, felt like watching life itself return to normal. "Elena," Lily said between sips of juice, "do you have any kids?" Elena's expression grew thoughtful. "No, I don't. But I had a little brother when I was growing up. His name was Miguel, and he was about your age when he got hurt in an accident, too. Did he get better?" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. He went to heaven, but that was a long time ago, and medical care is much better now. You're going to be just fine." Jack saw the shadow that crossed Elena's face, understanding now why she'd chosen to specialize in pediatric trauma care. The loss of her brother had shaped her professional path, driving her to ensure that other families didn't experience the same devastating outcome. Throughout the morning, a steady stream of visitors arrived to check on Lily. Mrs. Chun brought a small stuffed bear and a bag of Lily's favorite cookies. Principal Martinez delivered get-well cards from Lily's classmates, each one decorated with colorful drawings and messages written in careful second-grade handwriting. Captain Burke appeared with a small wooden boat he'd carved himself, complete with tiny sails that actually moved in the breeze from the air conditioning vent. Lily examined each gift with the careful attention that children reserved for truly special presents, arranging them on her bedside table where she could see them all. Jack watched her face light up as she read the messages from her friends, their innocent well wishes bringing color back to her pale cheeks. "Look, Daddy," she said, holding up a card decorated with a crayon drawing of a hospital. "Emma drew me, getting better, and she said I can sit with her at lunch when I come back to school." The simple assumption that she would return to school, that life would resume its normal patterns, felt like a small miracle to Jack. Children, he realized, possessed a resilience that adults often forgot existed, the ability to accept traumatic changes and focus on future possibilities, rather than dwelling on past trauma. Elena appeared with a wheelchair decorated with purple ribbons. "Time for your trip to get that cast, Lily. Are you ready to pick out your color?" The journey to the orthopedic department became an adventure, with Lily pointing out interesting sights along the hospital corridors. The fish tank in the children's wing, the mural painted by local artists, the therapy dog visiting with other patients. Elena wheeled her carefully, stopping to introduce her to other staff members who greeted Lily with genuine warmth. The cast technician, a cheerful woman named Rosa, let Lily choose from an array of colored fiberglass options. Purple, as requested, but with silver sparkles that caught the light and made the medical necessity feel more like a fashion accessory. "How long do I have to wear it?" Lily asked as Rosa shaped the warm casting material around her arm. "About 6 weeks," Rosa replied. "But the good news is, everyone at school will want to sign it. You'll be very popular." Jack watched the casting process with fascination, amazed by how quickly the protective shell formed around Lily's healing bones. The purple cast looked almost cheerful against her small arm, transforming the visible reminder of her accident into something that suggested recovery and hope. Back in the Trona room, Lily fell asleep, clutching the wooden boat Captain Burke had brought, her new cast propped on a pillow beside her. The afternoon passed quietly, with Elena checking on her regularly while attending to other patients in the children's wing. During one of these quiet moments, Jack found himself studying the small sketchbook that had been among Lily's personal effects from the accident. The cover was slightly scuffed, but the pages inside revealed a window into his daughter's inner world that he hadn't fully appreciated before. Drawing after drawing showed their life in Milbrook Harbor, the harbor itself with fishing boats, and seagulls, their rental house with its small garden, Jack working in his garage. But scattered throughout were pictures of their family before Sarah's death, stick figures labeled Mama, Daddy, and Lily standing in front of various backgrounds. A trip to the zoo, Christmas morning, Sarah in her nurse's uniform, stethoscope around her neck. The drawings revealed how completely Lily had integrated her mother's memory into her understanding of family. Sarah wasn't absent from these pictures. She was simply somewhere else, still part of the story, but located in a different chapter. Jack realized that his daughter's resilience came partly from this ability to hold on to love without being trapped by loss. Elena noticed him looking through the sketchbook. She's very talented. These drawings show a lot of emotional intelligence for a 7-year-old. She draws Sarah as though she's still with us, Jack said quietly. "I've been worried that she doesn't remember enough about her mother, but these pictures ... Children process grief differently than adults. They don't see death as an ending, the way we do. For Lily, her mother is still part of her daily experience, just in a different form." Jack turned to a drawing that showed their current house with 4 stick figures in front of it instead of the usual 3. The 4th figure was smaller, wearing what looked like a nurse's uniform. "I think she's been drawing you," he said, showing Elena the page. Elena looked at the picture with surprise and something that might have been emotion. "She drew me into your family?" "Apparently so. She works fast." They were interrupted by Lily stirring awake, her eyes immediately finding the sketchbook in Jack's hands. "Are you looking at my pictures?" "I was showing Elena the drawing you made." "Of her," Jack said, holding up the page. Lily smiled sleepily. "I drew her because she's taking care of me, like Mama used to take care of people at her hospital. Elena makes the scary things not scary." The simple observation carried more wisdom than Jack had expected. Elena did indeed have the gift of making frightening situations feel manageable, of bringing calm to chaos through competence and compassion. Watching her work throughout the day, Jack had begun to understand that nursing was as much about emotional healing as physical care. As evening approached, Elena's shift was ending, but she stopped by Lily's room before leaving. "I'll be back tomorrow morning, and I want to see how many people have signed your cast by then." Lily held up her purple cast, examining the silver sparkles. "Will you sign it?" Elena took a marker and wrote carefully on the smooth surface. "To Lily, stay brave and keep drawing. Your friend, Elena." After Elena left, Jack settled into the bedside chair for another night of watching over his daughter. The hospital sounds had become familiar, the soft beeping of monitors, the distant conversations of night shift staff, the occasional announcement over the intercom system. Lily fell asleep easily, exhausted by the day's activities, but clearly more comfortable than she'd been the night before. Jack opened her sketchbook again, looking at the drawings with new appreciation for their insight into his daughter's emotional world. On the last page with drawings, he found one that made him pause. It showed a man working on a car while a woman stood nearby, both figures smiling. In the background, barely visible unless you looked carefully, was a small heart drawn in light pencil strokes. Lily, it seemed, had been paying attention to more than just her own healing during their time at the hospital. She'd been watching the adults around her, noting connections and possibilities with the clear-eyed perception that children brought to the complicated world of grown-up emotions. Jack closed the sketchbook and looked out the window at the harbor, lights twinkling in the distance. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, discharge planning, follow-up appointments, the ongoing police investigation into the hit-and-run accident. But tonight, Lily was safe and healing, surrounded by people who cared about her welfare. For the first time since the accident, Jack allowed himself to think beyond the immediate crisis. Lily would recover fully from her injuries, return to school, resume her normal childhood activities. The cast would come off in 6 weeks, leaving only a small scar as evidence of this frightening time. But other changes might be more permanent. Elena's presence in their lives had already shifted something fundamental, creating connections that extended beyond medical necessity. Jack wasn't sure what that meant yet, but he was beginning to suspect that his daughter's drawings might be more prophetic than he'd realized. Elena arrived for her morning shift, carrying a small bag that rustled with the promise of something special. Jack had been awake since dawn, watching Lily sleep peacefully, her purple cast catching the early sunlight that streamed through the hospital room windows. The night had passed without incident, marked only by routine checks from the overnight nursing staff and the distant sounds of a hospital that never truly slept. "Good morning," Elena said quietly, setting her bag on the bedside table. "How did she do overnight?" "Better than the first night. She only woke up once, and that was just to ask for water." Jack stretched, working out the stiffness that came from spending another night in the uncomfortable bedside chair. "I think she's getting used to being here. That's good, but not too good. We want her to be comfortable enough to heal, but eager enough to go home that she'll work hard in physical therapy." Elena checked Lily's chart, making notes about her vital signs and medication schedule. "Dr. Harrison thinks she might be ready for discharge tomorrow if her concussion symptoms continue improving." Lily stirred at the sound of their voices, her eyes opening slowly before focusing on Elena with immediate recognition. "You came back. Did you bring me something?" "I can hear a bag." Elena smiled, producing a small package wrapped in purple tissue paper. "I thought you might like some new, colored pencils for your drawings. I noticed your sketchbook yesterday." Lily's face lit up as she unwrapped the gift, a set of professional quality colored pencils in a wooden box. Far nicer than the basic crayons she usually used. "These are really pretty." "Thank you, Elena. Can I draw you a picture?" "I would love that. But first, let's see about getting you some breakfast and checking how you're feeling today." As Elena helped Lily with her morning routine, Jack found himself watching their interaction with growing appreciation for the nurse's instinctive understanding of children. She never talked down to Lily, but she also never forgot that her patient was 7 years old with 7-year-old concerns and capabilities. The balance required both professional training and personal intuition. During breakfast, Lily worked on a new drawing while Elena and Jack discussed her care plan. The conversation was practical medication schedules, follow-up appointments, signs to watch for once they were home. But Jack noticed how Elena's attention remained divided between his concerns and Lily's needs, ensuring that their adult conversation didn't exclude or frighten the child, who was the subject of their planning. "The cast will need to stay dry for the first 48 hours, Elena explained, "but after that, she can take baths if you're careful to keep the cast above water level. Swimming is out for now, but most other activities are fine once she feels ready." "What about school?" "She's been worried about missing too much. Probably Monday, if the weekend goes well. The school nurse will need to help her with some things, opening milk cartons, carrying her backpack, but children adapt quickly to temporary limitations." Lily looked up from her drawing. "Will you come visit me at school, Elena?" "I want to show my friends who took care of me." Elena exchanged a glance with Jack before answering. "I don't usually make school visits, sweetheart, but maybe your daddy could bring you back to the hospital sometime to say hello. Or maybe," Lily said with the straightforward logic of childhood, "you could come to our house for dinner. Daddy makes really good spaghetti, and I could show you my room." Jack felt heat rise in his cheeks. "Lily, Elena has her own life and her own family. She can't just—" "Actually," Elena interrupted gently, "I don't have much family nearby." "And I do. Like spaghetti." The offer hung in the air between them, casual enough to accept or decline without awkwardness, but significant enough that Jack understood they were discussing more than a simple meal. Elena was suggesting a connection that extended beyond the professional relationship that had brought them together. Before Jack could respond, Dr. Harrison arrived for morning rounds. His examination of Lily was thorough, but brief, checking her reflexes, asking questions about her memory and any persistent headaches, testing her balance and coordination. The results were encouraging enough that he confirmed Elena's earlier prediction about discharge. "One more night for observation, then home tomorrow, if everything continues looking this good," he told Jack. "She's healing remarkably well. Children's resilience never ceases to amaze me." After the doctor left, Elena began teaching Jack the practical aspects of caring for Lily's injuries at home. How to help her dress around the cast, what activities to encourage and which to avoid, warning signs that might indicate complications requiring immediate medical attention. "The most important thing," Elena said, "is to let her be as normal as possible while respecting her body's need to heal. Don't treat her like she's fragile, but don't ignore the fact that she's been through trauma." Jack appreciated the advice, recognizing that Elena's experience with pediatric patients gave her insights that went beyond his parental instincts. Lily had always been active and independent. Restricting her too much might slow her emotional recovery, even if it protected her physical healing. "Can I still go to dance class?" Lily asked, overhearing their conversation. Elena considered this carefully. "Not for a few weeks, but Miss Rodriguez might let you come watch and maybe participate in some of the exercises. That don't require using your arm. We'll ask her." The afternoon brought more visitors. Mrs. Chun arrived with a puzzle featuring scenes from around Milbrook Harbor, perfect for occupying Lily's time without requiring two hands. Principal Martinez stopped by with schoolwork packets and messages from Lily's teacher about modified assignments that would help her keep up with her class. Officer Reynolds came by around 3 o'clock, his presence immediately shifting the room's atmosphere to something more serious. Jack had been dreading this conversation, knowing it would force them to confront the reality that someone had hit his daughter and driven away without stopping to help. "I need to ask Lily a few questions about yesterday afternoon," Reynolds explained to Jack, his voice gentle but professional. Sometimes children remember details that adults miss. Jack looked at his daughter, who was coloring with her new pencils while listening to their conversation. "Lily, Officer Reynolds wants to talk to you about your accident. Is that okay?" Lily nodded solemnly. "I want to help catch the person who hurt me." Reynolds knelt beside her bed, bringing himself to her eye level. "Can you tell me why you left school early yesterday?" "I didn't leave early. I was walking home after school, but I wanted to stop at the harbor first to see if Captain Burke's boat was back from fishing." Jack felt confusion wash over him. "Sweetheart, the school said you were missing from afternoon classes. I was there for reading group, but then my tummy hurt and I went to the nurse's office. She said I could go home if I felt sick." Lily's brow furrowed with concentration. "But I started feeling better when I was walking, so I thought I could take the long way and see the boats." Reynolds made notes while Elena and Jack exchanged glances. The timeline was becoming clearer. Lily had left school legitimately due to illness, but instead of coming straight home, she detoured toward the harbor, putting her on Harbor Road at the wrong time. "What do you remember about the car that hit you?" Reynolds asked. Lily's expression grew uncertain. "It was big and dark, like the color of storm clouds. And it was going really fast, faster than cars usually go on Harbor Road. I tried to get out of the way, but—" "That's very helpful, Lily. You're being very brave by talking about this." Reynolds continued his gentle questioning for several more minutes, gathering details about the time of day, the weather conditions, and anything else Lily might have noticed. Her 7-year-old memory provided fragments rather than a complete picture, but even fragments could be useful in an investigation. After the officer left, Elena sat with Lily while she continued coloring, their conversation drifting to lighter topics: favorite colors, preferred pizza toppings, the names of all the fishing boats in Milbrook Harbor that Lily had memorized. Jack found himself listening to Elena's voice, noting the way she adjusted her tone and vocabulary to match his daughter's developmental level without ever sounding condescending. During a quiet moment, Elena showed Jack a small metal object she wore on a chain around her neck, a saint's medal, worn smooth by years of handling. "This was Miguel's," she said quietly, ensuring Lily couldn't overhear. "Our grandmother gave it to him when he started school, said it would protect him. After he died, I thought it had failed somehow. But now I think maybe it was just waiting for the right time to help." Jack understood the weight that small objects could carry. Sarah's stethoscope in his bedroom drawer served a similar purpose, a tangible connection to someone lost, a reminder of love that transcended physical presence. "How old was he when the accident happened?" Jack asked. 8. A thunderstorm had knocked out power lines, and the emergency dispatch system was compromised. The ambulance took 40 minutes to reach him, instead of the usual 8 or 10. By then, double quotes Elena touched the metal gently. I became a nurse because I never wanted another family to lose someone due to delayed medical response. The revelation explained Elena's urgency that first morning, her willingness to work double shifts, her obvious dedication to pediatric trauma care. Her brother's death had given direction to her professional life, just as Sarah's medical career had influenced Jack's understanding of what it meant to care for others. That's why you were so desperate to reach the hospital in time to help the president's wife, Jack said. Every patient matters, but high-profile cases get resources that others might not. If saving her life meant that trauma protocols got better, funding or attention, then maybe other children would have better outcomes. Miguel's death had to count for something. Elena's philosophy resonated with Jack's own struggle to find meaning in Sarah's death. His late wife had saved countless lives during her nursing career. Her legacy lived on in the protocols she'd helped develop and the younger nurses she'd mentored. Sometimes the best way to honor loss was to ensure it led to positive change for others. As evening approached, Elena's shift was ending again, but she lingered in Lily's room longer than professional duty required. They discussed practical matters, discharge instructions, follow-up appointment scheduling, contact information for questions that might arise over the weekend. About that dinner invitation, Elena said as she prepared to leave. If you're serious, I do have Sunday evening free. I could bring dessert. Jack felt something shift in his chest, not the sharp pain that thoughts of dating had triggered in the 3 years since Sarah's death, but a gentle warmth that suggested possibility rather than betrayal. We'd like that? He said simply. Lily would be thrilled, and I think I would too. Elena smiled, the expression transforming her face from professional competence to something more personal and vulnerable. Then it's a date. Well, not a date exactly, but a dinner, Jack finished, with friends. After Elena left, Lily worked on her drawing while Jack reflected on the day's conversations. His daughter was healing well, both physically and emotionally. The police investigation was proceeding, though Reynolds had cautioned that hit-and-run cases could be difficult to solve without witnesses or physical evidence. Most surprisingly, Jack found himself looking forward to Sunday dinner with an anticipation that had nothing to do with obligation or politeness. Elena's presence in their lives felt natural rather than intrusive, as though she'd been meant to be part of their story from the moment her car had broken down on Harbor Road. Lily held up her latest, drawing a picture of their house with 3 figures standing in front of it. Jack recognized himself and Lily immediately, but the third figure wore scrubs and had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Is that Elena? He asked. Lily nodded seriously. I drew her coming to dinner with us. Do you think she'll like our house? Jack looked at his daughter's hopeful face, understanding that her eagerness for Elena's visit went beyond simple gratitude for medical care. Lily was a child who'd grown up without her mother, surrounded by loving adults, but missing the particular kind of nurturing that women often provided. Elena's compassionate attention had filled a need that Jack hadn't fully recognized until now. I think she'll like it very much, he said, and I think she's going to become a very good friend to both of us. As Lily drifted off to sleep, still clutching her new colored pencils, Jack realized that their weekend dinner plan represented more than a social courtesy. It was the beginning of something new, not a replacement for what they'd lost, but in addition to what they were building together. The saint's medal around Elena's neck had indeed been waiting for the right time to help, just as Jack's willingness to fix a stranger's car had positioned him to receive help when his own family needed it most. Sometimes the most important connections began with small acts of service that seemed insignificant at the time, but created ripples that changed everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after Lily's discharge from the hospital, delivered by a courier in a crisp white envelope bearing the presidential seal. Jack had been in his garage, working on Mrs. Henderson's lawnmower while out. Lily sat at his workbench, carefully coloring with the pencils Elena had given her, when the doorbell rang with unusual persistence. "Mr. Monroe?" The courier, a young man in a navy blazer, held the envelope with ceremonial precision. "I have a delivery for Elena Reyes, but her hospital said she'd be here this morning." Elena had indeed been coming by most mornings for the past 2 weeks, officially to check on Lily's recovery, but staying longer each time to help with exercises, answer Jack's medical questions, and simply spend time with them both. Her presence had become as natural as the morning coffee routine, woven into their daily rhythm without fanfare or formal discussion. "She's inside with Lily," Jack said, wiping his hands on a shop rag. "Should I get her?" "If you would, sir." "This requires her signature." Jack found Elena and Lily in the kitchen, working together on a puzzle featuring lighthouse scenes from the Maine coast. Lily's cast-wearing arm was propped on a pillow, but she was managing the puzzle pieces with impressive dexterity using her uninjured hand. "There's a courier here for you," Jack told Elena. "Something official looking." Elena's expression shifted to confusion, then concern. "I'm not expecting anything. Did they say what it was?" Presidential seal on the envelope. Understanding dawned across Elena's features, followed immediately by embarrassment. "Oh no, I was hoping they'd forgotten about that." At the front door, Elena signed for the envelope, while the courier explained that he tried to deliver it to her apartment first, then the hospital, before being directed to Jack's address. The implication that Elena spent enough time here to be findable at this location wasn't lost on any of them, but the courier maintained professional discretion. After he left, Elena stared at the unopened envelope as though it contained something potentially dangerous. "Aren't you going to open it?" Lily asked, her curiosity overcoming any sense of adult privacy. Elena carefully broke the wax seal and unfolded an embossed letter written on heavy cream paper. As she read, her expression moved through surprise, disbelief, and finally something approaching distress. "What is it?" Jack asked gently. Elena handed him the letter, her hands trembling slightly. The language was formal, but warm, acknowledging Elena's exceptional service in providing life-saving medical care to the First Lady during her recent medical emergency. The letter went on to detail Elena's quick thinking, professional expertise, and dedication to excellence in patient care. "They're giving you a commendation," Jack said, reading further. "A formal recognition ceremony at the hospital, with the president attending personally to present the award." "I don't want it," Elena said quietly. "I was just doing my job." Any nurse would have done the same thing. Lily looked between the adults, sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Isn't getting an award a good thing?" Elena knelt beside Lily's chair, bringing herself to eye level with the child. "It is a good thing, sweetheart. I'm just not comfortable with attention for doing what I'm supposed to do. Nurses help people every day without recognition." Jack understood Elena's discomfort on a deeper level than she might have expected. After Sarah's death, well-meaning friends and colleagues had wanted to honor her memory with plaques and memorial services, gestures. That felt overwhelming when all he'd wanted was private space to grieve. Sometimes recognition, however well-intentioned, could feel like an intrusion on personal experience. "When is the ceremony?" he asked, continuing to read the letter. "Next Friday, 2:00 at the hospital. They want me to invite family and friends." Elena's voice carried a note of irony. "I don't have much family nearby, and most of my friends are colleagues who will be working." "We'll come," Lily announced with the decisive authority that 7-year-olds brought to important matters. "Won't we, Daddy?" "Elena helped save the president's wife, and then she helped save me. She deserves an award." Jack met Elena's eyes over Lily's head, seeing gratitude mixed with vulnerability in her expression. The recognition meant more to her than she was admitting, but she was genuinely uncomfortable with public attention. Her brother's death had driven her to excel in pediatric care, but she preferred the quiet satisfaction of helping individual families rather than broad acknowledgement of her skills. "We'd be honored to attend," Jack said. "If you'd like us there." Elena's smile was answer enough, though she quickly turned her attention back to the puzzle to hide the emotion that had risen to her eyes. The following week passed with unusual anticipation in their household. Lily practiced signing her name in careful letters so she could autograph Elena's ceremonial program. Jack found himself thinking about what to wear to a presidential event, realizing that his wardrobe consisted primarily of work clothes and casual wear suitable for a small coastal town. Elena, meanwhile, seemed increasingly nervous as Friday approached. She confided to Jack that she'd never been comfortable with formal events, preferring the controlled environment of medical settings where her role and responsibilities were clearly defined. "What if I say something wrong?" she asked during one of their morning coffee conversations while Lily colored at the kitchen table. "You save lives for a living," Jack replied. "I think you can handle a thank you speech. That's different. In the hospital, I know what I'm doing. This is people recognizing that what you do matters," Jack finished. "Let them." The ceremony took place in Mercy General's main conference room, which had been decorated with American flags and formal arrangements of white roses. Hospital administrators, local officials, and medical staff filled the chairs, along with representatives from the regional media who'd been invited to document the event. Jack and Lily sat in the front row of seats reserved for Elena's guests, Lily wearing her best dress and Jack in the one suit he'd owned since Sarah's funeral. Elena had protested that they were her only real guests, but Jack pointed out that quality mattered more than quantity, that the president arrived precisely on time, accompanied by a small entourage of Secret Service agents and administrative staff. He was smaller in person than he appeared on television, but his presence filled the room with the particular gravity that powerful people carried. Jack found himself impressed by the president's obvious comfort with the formal setting, the ease with which he engaged hospital staff and local officials in brief conversations before the ceremony began. When Elena was called forward to receive her commendation, she moved with the same calm competence she brought to medical emergencies. Though Jack could see the tension in her shoulders, the president's remarks were brief but heartfelt, emphasizing the difference that individual excellence could make in moments of crisis. "Nurse Reyes represents the best of American healthcare," he said, presenting Elena with a framed certificate and a small bronze medallion. "Her skill and dedication quite literally saved my wife's life, and our nation is grateful for her service." Elena's response was equally brief, thanking her colleagues and emphasizing the team effort that emergency medicine required. She mentioned nothing about her brother or the personal motivations that drove her professional dedication, maintaining the privacy that Jack had learned to respect about her past. The reception following the ceremony was more challenging for Elena than the formal presentation had been. Local officials wanted to discuss healthcare policy, hospital administrators sought photo opportunities, and reporters asked questions about her background and training. Jack watched her navigate these conversations with polite professionalism while clearly longing for escape. Lily, meanwhile, was fascinated by everything: the Secret Service agents with their earpieces, the elaborate flower arrangements, the formal photographer who documented every moment. She stayed close to Jack, but observed everything with the wide-eyed attention that children brought to new experiences. "Are you famous now?" she asked Elena during a brief, quiet moment. "I don't think so, sweetheart. This is just people saying, 'Thank you for doing my job.'" "But you did it really, really well," Lily insisted. "Better than anyone else could have done it." Elena knelt beside Lily's chair, straightening the purple cast that had become a conversation starter with curious officials. "You know what? You're right. I did do it well, and it's okay to be proud of that." The admission seemed to release some of Elena's tension about the recognition. Watching her accept congratulations from colleagues and community members, Jack realized that Elena's discomfort came partly from the same impulse that made her an excellent nurse, the focus on others rather than herself, the instinct to deflect attention back to patients and teamwork. After the president left and the formal ceremony concluded, the three of them walked through downtown Milbrook Harbor toward Jack's house. Elena still carried her commendation certificate, though she'd removed the formal medallion and tucked it into her purse. "That wasn't as terrible as I expected," she admitted as they passed Chun's Market, where Mrs. Chun had posted a congratulatory sign in the window. "You looked very professional," Jack said. Sarah would have been proud to see another nurse getting that kind of recognition. It was the first time Jack had spontaneously mentioned Sarah in Elena's presence, the comment emerging naturally rather than feeling forced or awkward. Elena didn't respond directly, but she reached for his hand as they walked, a simple gesture that acknowledged the significance of his trust in sharing that thought. At home, Lily insisted on helping Elena display her commendation certificate. On the kitchen counter, propping it carefully against a small vase of flowers that Jack had picked from their modest garden. "Now everyone who comes to dinner can see it," Lily announced with satisfaction. Elena had been joining them for dinner twice a week since her first Sunday evening visit, the arrangement developing naturally without formal discussion. She brought dessert or wine, helped with cooking, and stayed afterward to help Lily with homework or work on puzzles. The routine felt domestic and comfortable, filling the house with conversations and laughter that had been missing since Sarah's death. "I should probably take it home," Elena said, looking at the certificate. "It belongs in my apartment, not your kitchen." "Why?" Lily asked with 7-year-old directness. "You're here all the time anyway, and we like looking at it." Jack felt heat rise in his cheeks at his daughter's casual observation, but Elena smiled rather than looking uncomfortable. "I am here a lot, aren't I?" she said thoughtfully. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." That evening, after Elena had left and Lily was asleep, Jack found himself thinking about the day's significance beyond the formal recognition ceremony. Elena's commendation represented external validation of what he'd observed from the beginning: her exceptional skill, her genuine compassion, her dedication to healing others. But more than that, the ceremony had marked Elena's growing integration into their family life. She'd chosen them as her guests, included them in her moment of recognition, allowed Lily to share her pride in the accomplishment. The boundaries between professional relationship and personal connection had blurred completely, replaced by something deeper and more meaningful. Jack looked at Sarah's photograph on the mantel, the image that had anchored their home for 3 years. His late wife's smile seemed to carry approval rather than reproach, as though she understood that love expanded rather than replaced, that Elena's presence honored rather than threatened the memory of their marriage. The presidential commendation would hang in Elena's apartment, but its significance lived here in their kitchen, in Lily's proud retelling of the ceremony, in Jack's growing understanding that heroism often wore scrubs and spoke softly, changing lives one patient at a time. Outside, the harbor reflected the evening lights of fishing boats and channel markers, the same view that had drawn Jack to Milbrook Harbor when he'd needed a place to heal. Now it seemed like a view shared, rather than simply observed, part of a life being rebuilt with careful attention to both past love and future possibility. The chain around Jack's neck had grown heavier in recent weeks, though the weight came not from the thin gold links, but from the wedding ring that hung beneath his shirt, resting against his chest with each heartbeat. He'd moved it there from his finger 18 months after Sarah's death, when Lily had asked why he still wore it if Mama was in heaven. The transition to wearing it as a pendant had felt like a compromise, keeping Sarah close while acknowledging that his hands needed to be free for the practical work of single parenthood. Now, 3 weeks after Elena's commendation ceremony, the ring felt like a question that demanded an answer. Elena had become part of their daily rhythm so naturally that Lily had stopped asking when she was coming over and started asking what they should cook for her. Tuesday and Friday evenings were established dinner nights, but Elena often stopped by other days, as well bringing groceries when Jack was running late from work, helping Lily with physical therapy exercises, or simply sharing coffee while they talked about everything and nothing. The domestic ease of these interactions both comforted and unsettled Jack. He found himself looking forward to Elena's arrival each day, listening for her car in the driveway, feeling the house come alive in ways he'd forgotten were possible. But the pleasure was complicated by guilt that felt both rational and completely unfair to everyone involved. Sarah's presence filled their house in ways both obvious and subtle. Her medical textbooks still occupied shelves in the living room. Her favorite coffee mug remained in its spot in the kitchen cabinet, and photographs from their 10-year marriage marked important moments throughout the home. Jack had never removed these reminders because they helped Lily maintain connection with her mother's memory. But lately, he'd begun to wonder if they also served as barriers to moving forward. Elena navigated this landscape of memory with remarkable sensitivity, never commenting on Sarah's pictures or belongings, never suggesting changes to domestic arrangements that had been established in her absence. She praised Lily's drawings that included her mother, listened to stories about when Mama was here, and answered medical questions by drawing on Sarah's nursing knowledge as well as her own. The balance required considerable emotional intelligence, and Jack recognized that Elena was managing her own complex feelings about entering a household shaped by loss. She'd never asked direct questions about his marriage or Sarah's death, but she'd made it clear through small gestures that she understood the delicate nature of their situation. "You know," Elena said one Friday evening as they cleaned up after dinner, "Lily talks about her mother in present tense most of the time. That's actually very healthy for a child her age." Jack was drying dishes while Elena washed, their movements coordinated by weeks of shared kitchen routine. Lily was in the living room, working on homework at the coffee table where she could see them through the doorway. The grief counselor we saw after Sarah died said the same thing. Children don't process death as finality the way adults do. She's integrated her mother into her understanding of family rather than treating her memory as something separate from daily life. That takes emotional wisdom. Jack nodded, setting a clean plate in the cabinet. "Sometimes I worry that I'm not doing enough to keep Sarah's memory alive for her, or that I'm doing too much and preventing her from moving forward." Elena paused in her washing, considering his words carefully. "From what I can see, you're doing exactly what she needs. Lily feels connected to her mother without being trapped by grief. That's a gift." The conversation carried implications that went beyond Lily's emotional health, though neither of them named those implications directly. Jack was raising his daughter in the shadow of love rather than loss, but his own relationship with Sarah's memory remained more complicated. Later that evening, after Elena had left and Lily was asleep, Jack stood in his bedroom looking at Sarah's side of the dresser, which remained exactly as she'd left it. Her jewelry box, her reading glasses, the small bottle of perfume that had long since stopped holding her scent, but which he couldn't bring himself to discard. Sarah's stethoscope lay wrapped in tissue paper in the top drawer, the one piece of her professional life that he'd kept separate from Lily's daily awareness. Jack had never told his daughter about the stethoscope, partly because it seemed too medical, an adult for a child's understanding, but mostly because it represented his private relationship with Sarah's memory. He unwrapped the stethoscope now, holding its weight in his hands and remembering the confidence with which Sarah had used it. She'd been an exceptional nurse, skilled at reading the subtle signs that indicated when patients needed aggressive intervention versus gentle monitoring. Her instincts had saved countless lives during her career, and her loss had created a gap in the emergency department that had never been completely filled. Elena possessed similar instincts, Jack realized, the same ability to read situations and respond with both competence and compassion. Watching her interact with Lily, He'd noticed how she anticipated needs before they were voiced, how she balanced medical knowledge with emotional support, how she made frightening situations feel manageable through steady presence and clear communication. The parallel between the two women felt both comforting and troubling. Was he drawn to Elena because she reminded him of Sarah, or despite the similarities? Was his growing attachment based on genuine connection, or simply the familiarity of being with someone who understood the weight that medical professionals carried? These questions had been troubling Jack for weeks, creating internal tension that he struggled to resolve. Sarah had been gone for 3 years. Logically, he knew that moving forward was healthy and necessary. But logic felt insufficient. When dealing with the complexity of love, loss, and the possibility of finding both again. The following Tuesday, Elena arrived for dinner, carrying flowers from her own garden. Late summer blooms that would be among the last before autumn settled over Milbrook Harbor. She'd been quieter than usual lately, and Jack wondered if she was struggling with some of the same questions that kept him awake at night. "These are beautiful," Lily said, accepting the bouquet with careful attention to the purple cast that would be removed in 2 more weeks. "Can we put them in Mama's vase?" Elena paused, flowers in hand, looking to Jack for guidance about this casual appropriation of Sarah's belongings. He nodded, understanding that Lily's request came from a place of inclusion rather than replacement. She wanted Elena's flowers to be welcomed with the same vessel that had once held Sarah's. They arranged the flowers together, Lily directing placement while Elena provided the height and reach that the child's injured arm couldn't manage. Jack watched from the kitchen doorway, struck by how natural they looked together, how Elena's patient attention brought out Lily's artistic instincts. "Perfect," Lily announced when they'd achieved the arrangement she envisioned. "Mama would like these flowers. She always said purple ones were good for thinking." "What did she mean by that?" Elena asked. "Purple is the color of quiet thoughts. When you need to decide something important, you should look at purple flowers and let your mind get still." Jack had never heard this piece of Sarah's philosophy, but it sounded exactly like something she would have told their daughter, practical wisdom, dressed in language that a child could understand and remember. After dinner, while Lily worked on a drawing at the kitchen table, Jack and Elena sat on the front porch, watching the harbor lights flicker on as darkness settled over the water. The late summer air carried the salt smell of low tide mixed with the sweet scent of Elena's flowers through the open door. "Jack," Elena said quietly, her voice carrying a hesitation that suggested important words were coming. "I need to tell you something about my feelings." Jack's heart rate increased, though he wasn't sure whether from anticipation or anxiety. "What is it?" "I think I'm falling in love with your family. With both of you, and I'm not sure that's fair to anyone involved." The admission hung between them in the evening air, honest and vulnerable in ways that made denial impossible. Jack had felt the same gravitational pull, the way Elena's presence had become essential to their daily happiness, the way her absence left the house feeling incomplete. "Elena," he began, then stopped, unsure how to voice the complexity of his own feelings. "I know it's complicated," she continued. "I know that Sarah will always be part of your life, part of Lily's understanding of family. I'm not trying to replace that or compete with it. But I can't pretend anymore that my feelings are purely professional or friendly." Jack reached for her hand, finding it warm and slightly trembling in the cooling air. "I've been feeling the same way, and feeling guilty about it. Because of Sarah? Because I don't know if what I feel for you is real, or just familiar. You're both nurses, both compassionate, both good with Lily. What if I'm just trying to recreate something that's gone?" Elena was quiet for a long moment, considering his honesty. What if it doesn't matter? What if the fact that we're both caring people is what drew us together, not some need to replace what you lost? Jack had never considered this perspective, that similarities might be the foundation for genuine connection rather than evidence of substitution. Sarah had been drawn to medicine by her desire to help others. Elena had chosen nursing for the same reasons. Their shared values had created the common ground on which both relationships had grown. "Lily adores you," Jack said, "but she's not looking for a replacement mother. She's looking for someone who understands that her mother is still part of her life. And you? What are you looking for?" Jack thought about the question, watching the lights of fishing boats move slowly across the dark water. "I think I'm looking for permission to be happy again, to love someone new without betraying what I had before." Elena squeezed his hand gently. "Maybe that permission has to come from you." Inside the house, Lily had finished her drawing and was calling for them to come see her latest masterpiece. They found her at the kitchen table, proudly displaying a picture of 3 figures standing beside Elena's flower arrangement, a family scene that included all of them, with Sarah's memory represented by the flowers in her vase. "I drew us having dinner together," Lily explained, "and I put Mama's flowers in the picture so she could be here too." Jack looked at his daughter's drawing, seeing the emotional wisdom that Elena had recognized from the beginning. Lily understood instinctively that love could expand rather than replace, that new relationships honored rather than threatened old ones. That night, after Elena had gone home and Lily was asleep, Jack stood again in his bedroom looking at Sarah's belongings. But instead of feeling trapped by her memory, he felt surrounded by her love, not as a barrier to moving forward, but as a foundation for building something new. He touched the wedding ring beneath his shirt, feeling its familiar weight against his chest. The ring would always represent his marriage to Sarah, the 10 years they'd shared, the love that had created Lily and shaped both their lives. But wearing it didn't have to mean closing his heart to new possibilities. Elena had been right about permission. It had to come from him. And looking at Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, seeing the way his daughter had naturally included everyone she loved in her vision of family, Jack realized that permission might already have been granted by the person whose opinion mattered most. Sarah had always wanted him to be happy. She'd have wanted Lily to grow up surrounded by love and care. She'd have appreciated Elena's skill and compassion, her dedication to helping others heal. The purple flowers on the kitchen table caught the last light from the harbor, their quiet beauty creating the space for important thoughts that Sarah had promised her daughter they would provide. And in that stillness, Jack finally understood that moving forward didn't require leaving the past behind. It meant carrying the best of what had been into whatever was coming next. The confession letter arrived at the Milbrook Harbor Police Station on a Thursday morning in October, 3 months after Lily's accident, delivered by a teenage boy whose hands shook as he placed the envelope on Officer Reynolds' desk. The boy left quickly, mumbling something about finding the letter pushed under his family's front door. But Reynolds had been investigating crimes in this small town long enough to recognize the weight of guilt in young shoulders. The envelope was standard, white paper, the kind sold at any grocery store, with "Police Urgent" written in careful block letters across the front. Inside, Reynolds found 3 pages of handwritten text, the penmanship neat, but showing signs of emotional stress in the occasional tremor of certain words. "My name is Tommy Vasquez, and I am 16 years old. I am the person who hit the little girl on Harbor Road on September 15th. I have been trying to write this letter for 3 months, but I was too scared. I can't sleep anymore, and my mom keeps asking why I'm sick all the time. I have to tell the truth." Reynolds read the confession twice before calling the district attorney's office. Hit-and-run cases involving children generated significant community pressure, and this one had been particularly frustrating due to the lack of witnesses or physical evidence. The fact that the perpetrator was a juvenile would complicate prosecution, but at least the family would finally have answers. The confession continued with details that only the actual driver could have known: the time of day, the weather conditions, the location where Lily had been struck. Tommy described driving his father's dark blue pickup truck, taking it without permission to visit friends on the other side of town. He'd been speeding because he was already late, getting the truck back before his father returned from work. I saw her at the last second. She was walking on the side of the road looking at boats in the harbor. I tried to stop, but the road was wet and the truck skidded. I hit her and she fell down. I got out to check on her, but she wasn't moving, and there was blood. I was so scared I would go to jail that I drove away. I know that was wrong. I know I should have helped her. Reynolds made notes as he read, cross-referencing Tommy's account with the evidence they'd collected from the scene. The details matched perfectly: the tire marks in the gravel, the paint scrape on a nearby fence post, even the estimated speed based on Lily's injuries. What surprised Reynolds most was the final paragraph of the confession, which revealed information he hadn't expected. I know the little girl's name is Lily Monroe because I asked around after the accident. I also know that the nurse who took care of her at the hospital is Elena Reyes. Elena lives in my neighborhood, and she helped take care of my grandmother when she had pneumonia last year. She doesn't know me very well, but she was really nice to my family. I feel terrible that I hurt someone, and then Elena had to help fix what I broke. This is why I have to confess. Elena deserves to know the truth about who caused the accident she had to help with. Reynolds set down the letter and reached for his phone. This case had just become significantly more complicated than a simple hit-and-run prosecution. The confession revealed a web of connections that would make the legal proceedings emotionally challenging for everyone involved. An hour later, Reynolds sat in Jack's garage, watching him work on Captain Burke's boat engine while Lily played nearby with a puzzle Elena had brought her. The normalcy of the scene made what he had to share feel even more difficult. Jack, I need to talk to you about Lily's accident. We've had a development. Jack looked up from the engine compartment, his expression immediately shifting to focused attention. Did you find the driver? In a way, he found us. Reynolds explained about the confession letter, watching Jack's face cycle through relief, anger, and confusion as he processed the information. 16 years old, Jack repeated when Reynolds finished. Just a kid who made a very adult mistake and compounded it by leaving the scene. But Jack, there's something else you need to know about this situation. Reynolds explained about Tommy's connection to Elena, the family relationship that would make any prosecution intensely personal for the nurse who had helped Lily recover. Jack listened in silence, his hands still holding the wrench he'd been using when the conversation started. Elena knows this boy? She treated his grandmother last year during a bout of pneumonia. According to the grandmother, Elena went above and beyond her professional duties, checking on the family at home, helping them navigate insurance paperwork, even bringing groceries when they couldn't afford to miss work for shopping trips. Jack felt the complexity of the situation settling over him like a weight. Elena had spent weeks helping his family heal from trauma caused by someone she'd previously helped, someone whose family she'd shown extraordinary kindness. The moral dimensions of seeking justice suddenly felt much more complicated. I need to tell Elena before she hears it from someone else, Jack said finally. I'll need to interview her as well, given her connection to both families. Can you ask her to come to the station tomorrow morning? After Reynolds left, Jack called Elena at the hospital, asking if she could stop by when her shift ended. He didn't explain the reason over the phone, but something in his tone must have conveyed urgency because she arrived within an hour, still wearing scrubs and carrying the tired expression that came from a particularly demanding day. Lily was napping on the living room couch, exhausted from her physical therapy session, so Jack and Elena sat at the kitchen table where they could speak quietly without waking her. They found the driver, Jack said without preamble. It was a 16-year-old boy named Tommy Vasquez. He confessed this morning. Elena's face went through several expressions: relief, surprise, and something approaching dismay. Tommy Vasquez? Are you sure? You know him? I know his family. His grandmother, Maria, was my patient last year. Pneumonia that turned into a hospitalization, and then months of recovery. Tommy was always there helping her, carrying her groceries, driving her to appointments. He seemed like such a responsible kid. Jack watched Elena process the information, seeing the conflict play out across her features. As a healthcare professional, she believed in accountability and consequences for actions that harmed others. As someone who had worked with the Vasquez family, she understood the devastating impact that criminal prosecution could have on a struggling household. What happens now? She asked. Reynolds wants to interview you tomorrow about your relationship with the family, and we'll need to decide how we want the prosecution to proceed. Elena was quiet for several minutes, staring at her hands folded on the kitchen table. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone wrestling with competing loyalties. Tommy's father works construction, and his mother cleans offices at night. They're barely making ends meet as it is. If Tommy goes to jail, they'll lose his help with Maria's care and his part-time job income. It could destroy the entire family. He nearly killed my daughter, Jack said, though his tone carried more sadness than anger. I know, and I'm not suggesting there shouldn't be consequences, but Tommy confessed voluntarily, Jack. After 3 months of carrying the guilt, he chose to tell the truth. That has to count for something. Jack thought about the boy who had written the confession letter, imagining 3 months of sleepless nights and the weight of knowing you'd hurt someone and failed to help. The decision to confess took a kind of courage that many adults wouldn't possess. What would Sarah have wanted? Elena asked quietly. The question caught Jack off guard, both because Elena rarely invoked Sarah's memory and because the answer came to him immediately. Sarah had believed in restorative rather than punitive justice, in healing communities rather than simply punishing wrongdoing. She'd often said that the goal of consequence should be to prevent future harm, not to satisfy the desire for revenge. She'd want whatever was best for Lily in the long run, Jack said, and probably whatever was best for Tommy too. Elena nodded, understanding. Lily's going to have questions about why someone hit her and drove away. How we handle this situation will shape how she understands justice and forgiveness for the rest of her life. That evening, after Elena had gone home and Lily was having her bedtime story, Jack found his daughter studying her purple cast, which would be removed in just 1 more week. Daddy, when my cast comes off, will I still remember being hurt? The question was more profound than Jack had expected from a 7-year-old. You'll remember it, sweetheart, but it won't hurt anymore. Sometimes when we heal from something, we understand it differently than when it first happened. Elena says that scars are just proof that we can get better from bad things. Jack tucked the blanket around his daughter, struck by the wisdom in Elena's explanation. What do you think about that? I think Elena is really smart. And I think maybe the person who hit me feels really bad about it. Why do you think that? Lily considered the question with the seriousness she brought to important matters. Because if I hurt someone by accident, I would feel terrible. And if I was too scared to say sorry at first, I would feel even worse until I finally told the truth. Jack felt his heart constrict with love for his daughter's capacity for empathy. Even at 7, Lily possessed an intuitive understanding of human nature that some adults never developed. The next morning, Elena met with Officer Reynolds while Jack waited in the station lobby, Lily beside him working on a new drawing with her good hand. Through the window of the interview room, Jack could see Elena answering questions, occasionally referencing notes she'd brought about her interactions with the Vasquez family. When the interview concluded, Reynolds called Jack into his office to discuss their options for prosecution. The district attorney was prepared to pursue charges that could result in juvenile detention, community service, or a combination of penalties. But the final decision about the severity of charges would be influenced by the victim's family preferences. There's another option, Reynolds said. Restorative justice. It's a program where the offender meets with the victim's family to take responsibility and make amends. Tommy would still face legal consequences, but the focus would be on repairing harm rather than punishment. Jack thought about Sarah's beliefs, about Lily's natural compassion, about Elena's understanding of the Vasquez family's circumstances. What would that look like? Tommy would meet with you and Lily, supervised by a trained mediator. He'd have to explain his actions, take full responsibility, and work out a plan for making amends. Community service, financial restitution if possible, maybe ongoing involvement, to demonstrate that he's learned from his mistake. Elena had been quiet during this explanation, but now she spoke up. I'd like to be part of that process, if you're willing. I know both families involved, and I think I could help facilitate understanding. Jack looked at Elena, understanding that her offer came from more than professional duty. She felt personally invested in both sides of this situation, the family she'd helped heal and the family she'd previously served. Her presence could help bridge the gap between justice and compassion. Let me talk to Lily about it, Jack said. Finally, this affects her too, and she should have a voice in how we handle it. That afternoon, Jack explained the situation to his daughter in terms she could understand. Someone had hurt her by accident, felt very bad about it, and now wanted to apologize and make things better. They could choose to have that person go to jail, or they could choose to meet with him and find a different way to solve the problem. Lily listened carefully, asking questions about what would happen to the boy's family if he went to jail, whether saying sorry would make the accident not have happened, and why someone might be too scared to tell the truth right away. I think, she said finally, I would like to meet him and see if he's really sorry. Elena says that sometimes people need help learning how to make better choices. Jack felt a surge of pride in his daughter's wisdom, understanding that her response reflected not naivety, but a sophisticated grasp of human complexity. At 7 years old, Lily had intuited what many adults struggle to accept, that justice could be about healing rather than punishment, that forgiveness could coexist with accountability. The confession letter that had arrived that morning would change everything for both families involved. But perhaps, with careful attention to healing and mutual understanding, it could also create the possibility for a resolution that honored both justice and mercy. Tommy Vasquez had found the courage to tell the truth after 3 months of carrying an unbearable secret. Now it remained to be seen whether two families could find the courage to forge a path forward that served both accountability and healing, guided by a 7-year-old's understanding that scars were simply proof that broken things could be made whole again. The restorative justice meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday afternoon at the community center on Harbor Street, a neutral location that felt less intimidating than the police station, but more formal than someone's home. Jack had spent the week wrestling with doubts about their decision, alternating between confidence that they were doing the right thing and anxiety about exposing Lily to a potentially difficult, emotional situation. Elena had been instrumental in the planning process, serving as an unofficial liaison between the two families while maintaining careful neutrality about the outcome. She'd met separately with Tommy's parents, Maria and Carlos Vasquez, helping them understand what restorative justice meant and preparing them for the emotional weight of seeing the family their son had harmed. Tommy has been having nightmares since he confessed, Elena told Jack during one of their evening conversations. His mother says he wakes up calling out apologies. The guilt has been eating him alive for 3 months. Jack found it difficult to summon sympathy for the teenager's suffering when he remembered his own sleepless nights in the hospital, watching Lily fight through pain and confusion. But Elena's reports helped him understand that punishment was already occurring. The question was whether formal consequences would add justice or simply pile suffering upon suffering. Lily's cast had been removed 2 days earlier, revealing an arm that was pale and slightly thinner than before, but completely healed. Dr. Harrison had pronounced her recovery complete, with no lasting effects from either the broken bones or the concussion. The physical healing felt symbolic as they prepared to face the person responsible for her injuries. "Are you nervous about meeting Tommy?" Jack asked Lily as they walked to the community center, Elena beside them carrying a folder of notes from her conversations with both families. "A little," Lily admitted, flexing her newly freed arm. "But mostly I'm curious. I want to see what kind of person he is." The community center's meeting room was arranged with two groups of chairs facing each other, with a single chair for the mediator positioned at the head of the space. Mrs. Jennifer Walsh, the Restorative Justice Coordinator, had explained that the physical setup was designed to encourage direct communication while providing enough structure to keep the conversation productive. Tommy and his family were already seated when Jack, Lily, and Elena arrived. The teenager was smaller than Jack had expected, thin and dark-haired with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. His parents flanked him protectively, his father Carlos, wearing a work shirt with paint-stained hands that spoke of honest labor, his mother Maria clutching a rosary and showing the strain of 3 months, spent watching her son struggle with guilt. Mrs. Walsh made brief introductions, then explained the process. Tommy would begin by taking full responsibility for his actions and their consequences. The Monroe family would have the opportunity to explain how the accident had affected them, and then together they would work toward understanding and a plan for making amends. "Tommy," Mrs. Walsh said gently, "would you like to begin?" The teenager looked at his parents, then at Jack and Lily, before focusing on a point somewhere between them. His voice was barely audible when he started speaking. "I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry for what I did to you, Lily. I've been wanting to say that for 3 months, but I was too scared to tell the truth." Jack watched his daughter listen intently, her young face serious, but not frightened. Elena had prepared her for this moment, explaining that apologies were important, but that they needed to understand the whole story before deciding whether forgiveness was appropriate. Tommy continued, his voice growing stronger as he found his rhythm. "I took my dad's truck without permission because I wanted to go see my friends in Eastport. I was driving too fast because I was already late getting the truck back. When I saw you walking on Harbor Road, I tried to stop, but I was going too fast, and the road was wet from the rain." He paused, swallowing hard before continuing. "I got out of the truck to check on you, and you were unconscious and bleeding from your head. I should have called for help right away, but I panicked. I was afraid I'd go to jail, and my family would lose our house, because my dad needs me to work to help pay the bills." Jack felt his anger returning as he listened to Tommy's explanation. The practical concerns that had motivated the boy's decision to flee felt insufficient when weighed against Lily's suffering and his own terror during those first hours at the hospital. "So you just left her there?" Jack asked, his voice tighter than he'd intended. "Yes, sir. And that was the worst thing I could have done. I drove away and left her hurt, and then I had to live with knowing that someone else found her and called for help. I should have been the one to call for help." Maria Vasquez spoke for the first time, her accented English careful and precise. "We taught Tommy better than that. We taught him to help people who are hurt, to take responsibility for his mistakes. When he told us what happened, we were so disappointed. Not angry, just broken-hearted that our son could drive away from a hurt child." Elena leaned forward slightly. "Tommy, do you understand how your decision to leave affected Lily and her?" "Father?" Tommy looked directly at Lily for the first time since the meeting began. "I think about it every day. While you were in the hospital getting better, I was walking around free like nothing happened. Your dad was probably scared you might die, and I knew you were hurt because of me, but I was too much of a coward to tell anyone." Lily had been quiet throughout this exchange, but now she spoke with the clear voice she used when she had something important to say. Tommy, were you really scared? Or were you just worried about getting in trouble? The question, delivered with a 7-year-old's directness, seemed to hit Tommy harder than anything the adults had said. He considered it carefully before answering. Both, I think. I was scared about what would happen to my family if I went to jail. But I was also scared because I realized I had done something that could have killed someone, and I didn't know how to face that. Did you know that Elena takes care of your grandmother sometimes? Tommy nodded, glancing at Elena with something that might have been shame. I found out after the accident when I was trying to learn your name. That made it even worse, knowing that someone from my neighborhood was helping you get better from what I did. Mrs. Walsh guided the conversation toward the impact statement phase, inviting Jack and Lily to explain how the accident had affected their lives. Jack spoke about the terror of getting the call from the school, the helplessness of watching his daughter unconscious in the hospital, the ongoing anxiety about her safety that had developed since the accident. But, he added, looking at Elena, the accident also brought some unexpected positive changes to our lives. Elena became our nurse, and now she's become family. So while I can't be grateful for what Tommy did, I can acknowledge that difficult. Experiences sometimes lead to growth and new connections. Lily's impact statement was shorter, but perhaps more powerful. I don't really remember being hurt, she said, but I remember waking up in the hospital and feeling scared about why I was there. The hardest part was knowing that someone hurt me and didn't stop to help. It made me feel like maybe people don't care about each other as much as I thought they did. Tommy's face crumpled at this last comment, and Jack saw the teenager finally grasping the full emotional impact of his actions. It wasn't just the physical injury that had caused harm. It was the damage to a child's faith in human goodness. Lily, Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion, I care about what happened to you. I cared from the moment it happened, but I was too scared to show it the right way. I've been caring about you every day for 3 months. Elena facilitated the next phase of the conversation, helping both families explore what meaningful amends might look like. Tommy's parents offered to pay for Lily's medical expenses, not covered by insurance, though Jack indicated that wasn't necessary, given the excellent insurance coverage from Sarah's former employer. What I think would help, Lily said thoughtfully, is if Tommy could prove that he learned something from what happened. Maybe he could help other kids understand why they should drive safely, or help people who get hurt in accidents. Mrs. Walsh took notes as the families brainstormed possibilities. Community service at the hospital, speaking to drivers' education classes about the consequences of reckless driving, volunteering with organizations that supported families dealing with medical crises. Tommy suggested an idea. That surprised everyone. What if I learned to fix cars, so I could help people when their cars break down? Like, if someone was in an emergency and their car wouldn't start, I could be the person who helps them instead of the person who makes things worse. Elena's eyes widened with recognition. That's actually a beautiful idea. Full circle using. Mechanical skills to help people rather than to cause harm. Jack found himself considering the suggestion seriously. His garage could accommodate an apprentice, and teaching mechanical skills might be a meaningful way for Tommy to demonstrate personal growth while contributing something positive to the community. Would you be interested in learning automotive repair? Jack asked. It's hard work, and it would mean spending a lot of time together while you learned. Tommy looked at his parents, then back at Jack. Yes, sir. I think I'd like that. And I think I need to spend time with your family to really understand what I did and how to make sure I never do anything like it again. The meeting continued for another hour, working out the details of Tommy's community service commitment, his legal consequences, which would be reduced given his voluntary confession and participation in restorative justice, and the ongoing relationship between the families. As they prepared to leave, Elena suggested one final element. I think it would be meaningful if Tommy wrote a letter to Lily every month for the next year, updating her on what he's learning and how he's working to become a better person. And maybe Lily could write back, sharing how she's continuing to heal and grow. Lily brightened at this idea. I like writing letters, and I want to see Tommy's drawings if he learns to draw car engines. Tommy smiled for the first time during the meeting. I'm not very good at drawing, but I could try. Walking home from the community center, Jack felt emotionally drained but oddly hopeful. The meeting had been difficult in ways he'd expected, and surprising in ways he hadn't. Tommy's remorse seemed genuine. His commitment to making amends appeared sincere, and the plan they'd developed felt more meaningful than traditional punishment would have been. How do you feel about everything? He asked Lily. I feel like Tommy is a good person who made a really bad choice, she said. And I think helping him learn to make better choices is more important than just being mad at him. Elena squeezed Jack's hand as they reached their front porch. I'm proud of both of you. What you did in there, choosing understanding over anger, healing over punishment, that took courage. That evening, as Jack tucked Lily into bed, she asked a question that revealed the depth of her processing. Daddy, do you think Mama would have liked what we decided today? Jack considered the question, thinking about Sarah's values and her commitment to healing rather than harm. I think Mama would have been very proud of your wisdom and your big heart. She always believed that forgiveness was stronger than anger. And she would have liked that Tommy wants to learn to fix cars so he can help people instead of hurting them. Yes, sweetheart. She would have loved that idea. As Lily drifted off to sleep, Jack sat on his front porch with Elena, watching the harbor lights reflect on the dark water. Tomorrow, Tommy would begin his community service at the hospital. Next week, he would start learning basic automotive repair in Jack's garage. In a month, the first exchange of letters would begin. The road ahead wouldn't be simple building. Trust and understanding between families connected by trauma required patience and ongoing commitment. But sitting in the gathering darkness with Elena, beside him and his daughter safely asleep inside, Jack felt hopeful about their capacity to transform hurt into healing. One careful step at a time, the restorative justice process had given them. Something that traditional punishment couldn't provide. The opportunity to build bridges instead of walls, to choose growth over grievance, and to demonstrate for Lily that the world still contained more goodness than harm. Even when harm came first. Tomorrow would bring the real work of turning their agreement into action. But tonight felt like the end of one chapter and the beginning of another one, written not in anger or fear, but in the patient script of forgiveness and the steady rhythm of second chances. 6 weeks into Tommy's apprenticeship at Jack's garage, the arrangement had settled into a rhythm that surprised everyone involved. The teenager arrived every afternoon after school, spending 2 hours learning basic automotive repair while serving. His community service hours. What had begun as court-mandated restitution had evolved into something approaching genuine mentorship. Tommy possessed natural mechanical aptitude and a kind of focused attention that Jack remembered from his own early training. More importantly, he approached each task with the careful reverence of someone who understood that his opportunity for redemption was precious and fragile. Hand me the 3/8 socket, Jack said, working on Mrs. Chun's temperamental sedan, while Tommy organized tools with meticulous precision. Yes, sir. Tommy located the correct socket immediately, evidence of weeks spent memorizing Jack's organizational system. Mr. Monroe, do you think Mrs. Chun knows that I'm the one who hurt Lily? Jack paused in his work. This was the first time Tommy had directly asked about community perception of his situation, though Jack had noticed the teenager's discomfort when townspeople stopped by the garage. Probably. Milbrook Harbor is a small town, and people talk. But Mrs. Chun keeps bringing you cookies when she picks up her car, so I think she's more interested in who you're becoming than who you were 6 months ago. Tommy nodded, considering this. My mom says that reputation is something you build one choice at a time, but that it takes a long time to build and only one mistake to tear down. Your mom is wise. But she probably also told you that people can rebuild their reputation if they're willing to do the work. Yes, sir. That's why I want to learn everything you can teach me. I want to be someone who helps fix things instead of breaking them. Jack felt the familiar tug of conflicted emotions that Tommy's presence created. Anger at the boy's initial choices remained, but it was increasingly overshadowed by respect for his commitment to making amends and genuine affection for his earnest desire to learn. The afternoon was interrupted by Elena arriving with Lily, both of them carrying bags from the library and chattering about a book report project on local history. Lily had thrown herself into researching Milbrook Harbor's fishing industry, interviewing elderly residents and documenting stories that might otherwise be lost. "Tommy," Lily called out as they entered the garage. "I found a book about the old fishing boats that used to work out of our harbor. Some of them had engines like the ones you're learning to fix." Tommy smiled, wiping his hands on a shop rag before accepting the book Lily offered. Over the weeks, their relationship had developed into something resembling older brother and younger sister Lily, treating Tommy as a trusted friend while Tommy showed her the careful protectiveness of someone who understood how precious and fragile children could be. "Look at this one," Lily said, pointing to a photograph of a 1940s fishing vessel. "Captain Burke says his grandfather worked on boats like this before they had modern engines." Elena watched their interaction with the satisfaction of someone whose instincts about human nature had been validated. She'd advocated for the restorative justice approach, partly because she'd sensed Tommy's genuine remorse, but also because she'd believed that Lily would benefit from seeing her accident as part of a larger story about learning and growth rather than simply random violence. "How's the homework coming?" Jack asked Lily, though he was really checking to ensure that her involvement with Tommy wasn't interfering with her school responsibilities. "I finished my math before we went to the library, and Elena helped me with my science project about ocean tides." Lily beamed at Elena with the kind of open adoration that had become increasingly common over the past months. Jack had noticed how naturally Lily included Elena in academic discussions, seeking her opinion on school projects and sharing excitement about grades and achievements. Elena responded to this attention with genuine interest while being careful not to overstep the boundaries of their still evolving relationship. "Tommy's been helping me understand how car engines work," Lily continued, apparently unaware of the adult undercurrents in their conversation. "He explained about pistons and spark plugs, so I could write about how fishing boat engines are different from car engines." Tommy's face showed the quiet pride of someone who discovered that teaching others enhanced his own learning. "Lily asks really good questions. She made me realize that I didn't really understand compression ratios until I had to explain them to someone else." Elena settled into the garage's comfortable chaos, reviewing patient files while keeping one eye on the mechanical lesson unfolding between Jack and Tommy. This domestic scene father and daughter, mentor and apprentice, all of them connected by circumstance and choice, represented something she'd never expected to be part of when she'd first moved to Milbrook Harbor. Her apartment across town had begun to feel temporary, a place where she slept and stored belongings rather than truly lived. Most of her meaningful time was spent here, in Jack's garage or kitchen, participating in the daily rhythms of a family that had gradually expanded to include her. "Elena," Lily said, abandoning her homework to approach with the directness that 7-year-olds brought to important matters, "are you going to marry my daddy?" The question landed in the garage's comfortable atmosphere like a small explosive device, creating immediate silence from all the adults, while Lily waited for an answer with characteristic patience. Jack's wrench slipped, clanging against the engine block. Tommy suddenly found urgent business organizing already organized tools. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks while she searched for an appropriate response to a question that cut straight to the heart of issues she and Jack had been dancing around for weeks. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" Elena managed, buying time while her mind raced. "Because you're here every day, and you help take care of me like mamas do. And Daddy smiles different when you're around. Mrs. Chun said that when grown-ups spend that much time together and smile that much, it usually means they're going to get married." Jack emerged from under the hood, his face showing the kind of panic that 7-year-old directness could inspire in even the most composed adults. "Lily, that's not really how." "It's okay," Elena interrupted gently. "It's a fair question." She knelt beside Lily's chair, bringing herself to eye level with the child, whose curiosity had just forced a conversation that might have been avoided for months longer. "Your daddy and I care about each other very much," Elena said carefully, "and we both love you. But getting married is a big decision that grown-ups have to think about very carefully. Are you thinking about it?" Elena glanced at Jack, seeing her own uncertainty reflected in his expression. "Yes, we've been thinking about it." "Good," Lily said with satisfaction. "Because I think it would be nice. You could live here all the time instead of just visiting, and I could have someone to braid my hair who actually knows how to make it look pretty." Tommy had abandoned all pretense of working and was listening to this family conversation with fascination. Jack caught his eye and gestured toward the front of the garage, suggesting they give Elena and Lily some privacy for what had become an unexpectedly significant discussion. "Lily," Elena continued once the males had retreated to a respectful distance, "if your daddy and I did decide to get married, how would you feel about that?" Lily considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "I would feel happy, but also a little scared." "What would scare you?" "What if you decided you didn't want to be my mama after all? What if you got tired of taking care of someone else's little girl?" Elena felt her heart constrict at the vulnerability in Lily's voice. The child had lost her biological mother at age 4. Of course she would fear abandonment by any woman who stepped into a maternal role. "Lily, listen to me very carefully. If I married your daddy, it wouldn't be because I was settling for someone else's family. It would be because I chose you and him, because I wanted to be part of your lives forever. Being your stepmother wouldn't make you less mine. It would make me lucky to be chosen by such an amazing little girl." Lily's eyes brightened. "Really? Really? But that decision involves your daddy too, and we need to make sure we're all ready for such a big change." "I'm ready," Lily announced with characteristic confidence. "I've been ready since you signed my cast." Elena laughed, remembering the day at the hospital when she'd written her name on Lily's purple cast, never imagining that she was signing up for permanent membership in this small family. From the front of the garage, she could hear Jack explaining automotive terminology to Tommy, their voices mixing with the afternoon sounds of Milbrook harbor fishing boats returning from day trips, children playing in distant yards, the eternal rhythm of waves against the harbor's stone barriers. This was the life she'd stumbled into. Through a combination of medical emergency and mechanical breakdown, a life she'd never planned but couldn't imagine leaving. Elena had spent years focused on her career, defining herself through professional achievement and the mission to save lives that her brother's death had inspired. But sitting in Jack's garage with Lily curled against her side, listening to the domestic sounds of learning and work and community, Elena realized that healing came in many forms. Sometimes it meant emergency medical intervention, but sometimes it meant showing up daily for the small moments that created family. "Elena?" Lily's voice was sleepy now, the afternoon's excitement catching up with her. "Yes, sweetheart? I think Mama would like you. You both take care of people, and you both make Daddy laugh." Elena felt tears prick her eyes at this simple benediction. Lily's acceptance meant more than community recognition or professional accolades, because it represented the trust of someone who had already lost too much and was brave enough to risk loving again. I hope so, Lily. I would have liked to meet her. You kind of did meet her. Daddy has her stethoscope in his dresser drawer, and sometimes when he's really sad, he holds it. But he hasn't done that since you started coming over for dinner. The observation revealed how carefully Lily monitored her father's emotional well-being, how attuned she was to the subtle signs of grief and healing. Elena understood that any woman who entered this family would be measured not just against Jack's needs, but against a 7-year-old's sophisticated understanding of what her father required to be truly happy. When Jack and Tommy returned to their work area, Elena caught Jack's eye and nodded slightly, a signal that the conversation with Lily had gone well. His relief was visible, though she suspected they would need to have their own discussion about marriage sometime soon, preferably when 7-year-old wedding planners weren't listening. As the afternoon faded into early evening, Tommy packed up his tools and prepared to head home for dinner with his family. His transformation over the past 6 weeks had been remarkable, from a guilt-ridden teenager avoiding eye contact to a confident young man who asked thoughtful questions and took pride in his growing mechanical skills. Same time tomorrow? He asked Jack, a question that had become routine, but still carried undertones of gratitude for the opportunity to continue learning. Same time tomorrow, Jack confirmed. We'll start working on brake systems next week. After Tommy left, Elena helped Lily gather her library books while Jack cleaned up the garage. The domestic routine felt natural and established, as though they'd been doing this for years rather than months. Lily told me you've been thinking about marriage, Elena said quietly as they walked toward the house. Jack's step faltered slightly. Among other things, have you been thinking about it? Every day for the past month. They reached the front porch where Elena usually said goodbye, preparing to drive to her apartment across town. But tonight felt different, charged with possibility, and the weight of decisions that needed to be made. Elena, Jack said, his voice carrying the careful tone of someone about to risk everything on uncertain ground. Would you like to stay for dinner? And maybe talk about some of those thoughts we've both been having? Elena looked at the house where she'd spent so many evenings, where Lily was already arranging her homework at the kitchen table, where Sarah's memory lived alongside new love and second chances. It felt like home in ways her apartment never had, like the place where she belonged rather than simply visited. I'd like that very much, she said. I think it's time we talked about a lot of things. As they entered the house together, Elena realized that Lily's direct question had accomplished what months of careful adult conversation had not. It had forced them to acknowledge that their relationship had already evolved beyond friendship, beyond even romance, into something that required naming and choosing and the courage to commit to an uncertain but hopeful future. After Lily was asleep, her breathing steady and peaceful in the room that had become her sanctuary, Jack and Elena sat at the kitchen table where so many of their important conversations had taken place. The house felt different in the evening, quiet, more intimate, charged with the weight of words that needed to be spoken and decisions that could no longer be postponed. Elena traced patterns on the wooden table surface, her fingers following the grain while she gathered courage for the conversation that Lily's afternoon question had made inevitable. Jack watched her hands move, remembering the same fingers checking his daughter's pulse in the hospital, teaching her how to hold colored pencils with a cast, braiding her hair with the patience that Lily had specifically mentioned. I've never been married, Elena said finally, her voice quiet but steady. I've never even lived with anyone long-term. My relationships always ended when the men realized that my career would always come first, that I'd choose an emergency call over dinner, plans that I carried too much emotional weight from losing Miguel. Jack nodded, understanding that Elena was offering him a complete picture of who she was before asking him to choose a future with her. And now? Now I find myself wanting to choose dinner plans over everything else, wanting to be here when Lily gets home from school, wanting to wake up in your house instead of my apartment. Elena's hands stilled on the table. It scares me how much I want this life with you and Lily. Jack reached across the table, covering her hands with his. What scares you about it? That I might not be good at it. That being a stepmother is different from being a nurse, and I might fail at it. That Lily might decide she doesn't really want me as a permanent part of her life. That you might realize you're not ready to share your family with someone new. The vulnerability in Elena's voice reminded Jack of his own fears during those first weeks in the hospital, when he'd been terrified of trusting someone else with his daughter's care. Elena had proven herself trustworthy in small daily moments, but marriage represented a different level of commitment, one that would affect Lily's entire childhood and adolescence. I've been scared too, Jack admitted. Not about you specifically, but about letting go of Sarah enough to make room for someone new. About whether it's fair to ask you to join a family that already has such deep history. Elena squeezed his hands gently. Tell me about that. Jack looked around the kitchen, where Sarah's presence still lingered in small details. The coffee mug she'd favored, the recipe cards written in her handwriting, the morning light that fell across the counter where she'd packed her lunch for hospital shifts. For 3 years, I've been frozen between honoring Sarah's memory and moving forward with life. I kept everything exactly the same because change felt like betrayal. But watching you with Lily, seeing how naturally you fit into our routines. Jack paused, searching for words that could capture the complexity of his feelings. You're not replacing Sarah. You're adding to what she started. Lily will always be Sarah's daughter, but she could also be your stepdaughter. I could be Sarah's widower and your husband. Love doesn't have to be either or. Elena felt tears gather in her eyes at the simple truth of his words. Is that what you want? To be my husband? Jack stood up from his chair, walking to the kitchen, window that overlooked the harbor. The evening lights reflected on dark water, creating patterns that shifted with each small wave. When he turned back to Elena, his expression carried the kind of certainty that came from finally understanding his own heart. Elena, I love you. I love the way you care for Lily, the way you've made our house feel like a home again, the way you've helped us both heal from trauma while dealing with your own grief. I love your dedication to helping others, your patience with Tommy's learning process, your ability to see the good in difficult situations. He returned to the table, kneeling beside Elena's chair, so they were at eye level. I want to marry you. I want Lily to have you as a stepmother, and I want us to build a life together that honors what we've both lost while embracing what we've found. Elena cupped Jack's face in her hands, seeing in his eyes the same mix of love and hope and lingering anxiety that she felt in her own heart. Are you sure? Marriage means I'll be here for soccer games and homework battles and teenage drama. It means sharing decisions about Lily's education and friendships and all the complicated parts of raising a child. I want all of that with you. I want to share the complicated parts because they're easier when there are two people who love her working together. Elena leaned forward, touching her forehead to his. Then yes, I want to marry you and be Lily's stepmother and wake up in this house every morning instead of visiting it. Jack kissed her then, a kiss that tasted like promise and commitment and the kind of deep relief that came from finally choosing happiness after years of careful guardedness. When they broke apart, both were crying tears of joy mixed with the emotional release that accompanied life-changing decisions. We should probably tell Lily tomorrow, Elena said, laughing through her tears, before she asks more direct questions in front of witnesses. She's going to want to help plan the wedding. I was counting on it. 7-year-olds have excellent taste in flowers and cake flavors. They talked until nearly midnight, discussing practical matters like timeline and location, but mostly sharing the kind of dreams and hopes that couples explored when they decided to build a future together. Elena would move into Jack's house gradually, bringing her belongings over in stages to help Lily adjust to the changes. The wedding would be small and local, probably at the harbor overlook that Lily loved for its view of the fishing boats. "What about your nursing pin?" Jack asked, remembering the small silver pin that Elena wore on her hospital uniform. Elena touched the pin automatically, then unpinned it carefully from her shirt. "My mentor gave this to me when I graduated from nursing school. She said it represented the commitment to serve others, but also the wisdom to know when serving others meant taking care of yourself and your family first." She held the pin out to Jack, who examined its delicate craftsmanship and worn edges that spoke of years of daily wear. "I think I'm ready to pass it on to someone else, maybe a young nurse at the hospital who's just starting out and needs encouragement." Jack understood the symbolism. Elena wasn't abandoning her calling to heal others, but she was expanding her definition of family to include the two people who needed her most. The pin would continue serving its purpose with someone new, while Elena stepped into a different kind of healing role. The next morning, they told Lily about their engagement over breakfast, though she seemed more interested in the practical details than the emotional significance. "When is the wedding? Can I wear a purple dress? Will Elena move her clothes into our house? Can Tommy come to the wedding since he's almost like family now?" Elena answered each question patiently, while Jack marveled at his daughter's ability to embrace major life changes with enthusiasm rather than anxiety. Lily had been building toward this moment through months of small observations and careful questions, so the formal announcement felt more like confirmation than surprise. "Will you still be Lily Monroe after Elena becomes Elena Monroe?" Lily asked, working through the implications of shared surnames. "You'll still be Lily Monroe," Jack assured her, "but Elena will become Elena Monroe too, which means you'll both have the same last name." "Good. That will make it easier when people need to find us at school events." Elena laughed at Lily's practical approach to family logistics. "You know what? I think you're going to be excellent at being part of a married couple's family. You understand all the important details." That afternoon, Elena brought a suitcase of clothes and personal items, officially beginning the process of merging two households into one. Lily helped arrange Elena's belongings in the bedroom, chattering about drawer space and closet organization with the expertise of someone who'd been thinking about these arrangements for weeks. "Elena," Lily said as they hung clothes in the closet, "that had been exclusively Jack's for 3 years. Can I call you Mom? Or should I call you Elena?" The question caught Elena off guard, both for its directness and for the complex emotions it stirred. She knelt beside Lily, taking her hands with the seriousness that important conversations deserved. "What would feel right to you?" Lily considered this carefully. "I think I'd like to call you Elena, Mom. Like you're my mom, but also still Elena, who takes care of sick people and knows about car engines." Elena felt her heart expand with love for this child who approached complex family dynamics with such wisdom. "Elena Mom sounds perfect to me." That evening, as they prepared dinner together, their first meal as an officially engaged family, Jack watched Elena and Lily move around the kitchen with increasing synchronization. Elena's nursing pin sat on the counter, waiting to be passed on to someone who needed its encouragement, while Elena herself had found a different kind of calling that was no less important. Tommy arrived for his evening tutoring session immediately. Noticing the subtle changes in household dynamics that indicated something significant had occurred. "Did something happen?" he asked Jack as they reviewed automotive theory at the kitchen table. "Elena and I got engaged," Jack said simply. "She's going to become part of our family officially." Tommy's face lit up with genuine happiness. "That's really great, Mr. Monroe. Elena's been good for you and Lily, and she's been good for me too, helping me understand how to make better choices." Jack felt gratitude for Tommy's presence in their lives, understanding that the teenagers' journey toward redemption had become intertwined with their family's journey toward healing and growth. The accident that had brought them all together had created connections that extended far beyond its original trauma. "Tommy," Elena said, joining them at the table, "Jack and I would like you to be part of our wedding ceremony. You've become important to this family, and we want you there for this next step." Tommy's eyes widened with surprise and something that might have been emotion. "Really? You want me there even though I'm the one who hurt Lily?" "Especially because of that," Jack said. "You've shown us that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define someone's entire life. Having you at our wedding would remind everyone that forgiveness and second chances are possible." As the evening wound down and Tommy prepared to head home, Elena realized that her life had become fuller and more complex than she'd ever imagined possible. She was about to become a wife and stepmother, responsibilities that felt both natural and overwhelming. But looking around the kitchen, where Lily was finishing homework while Jack reviewed automotive manuals and Tommy practiced writing technical descriptions, Elena understood that family wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up consistently. For the people who mattered most, the nursing pin on the counter caught the light from the overhead fixture, its silver surface reflecting the warm glow of domestic life. Tomorrow, Elena would give it to Sarah Martinez, a young nurse just completing her pediatric training, who reminded Elena of herself at that age, dedicated, slightly overwhelmed, and carrying the weight of wanting to save everyone. But tonight, Elena was exactly where she belonged, in a kitchen filled with the sounds of family life, wearing an engagement ring that Jack had placed on her finger with the same careful attention he brought to mechanical repairs, surrounded by people who had chosen to love each other despite difficult beginnings and uncertain futures. The wedding would happen in 6 weeks, just before the holidays that would mark their first celebration as an officially blended family. But the real joining had already occurred through months of small moments, daily choices, and the gradual understanding that love could indeed expand to embrace both memory and possibility, both loss and hope, both the family that had been and the family that was still becoming. 1 year later, the wedding photograph sat in a place of honor on the mantel, beside the original family portrait of Jack, Sarah, and baby Lily. The new image captured a different kind of family happiness. Jack and Elena at the harbor overlook, Lily between them in her carefully chosen purple dress, all three of them laughing at something Tommy had said from behind the photographer's shoulder. The wedding had been everything Lily had hoped for and more. Captain Burke had officiated, his weather-beaten hands surprisingly gentle as he guided them through vows they'd written themselves. Mrs. Chun had provided the flowers, late autumn blooms in shades of purple and gold that complemented the harbor's November colors. Tommy had served as an honorary usher, greeting guests with the confident smile of someone who'd found his place in a community that had chosen forgiveness over judgment. Alana's nursing pin now belonged to Sarah Martinez, who wore it proudly during her shifts in the pediatric ward. Elena had presented it during a small ceremony at the hospital, explaining its history and significance to the younger nurse, who reminded everyone of Elena's early dedication and drive. The tradition would continue, pin passing from mentor to student as each generation of healers found their calling and grew into their responsibilities. Jack's garage had expanded to accommodate Tommy's growing expertise, though the boy now, 17 and preparing for his senior year of high school, split his time between automotive work and college preparation. His mechanical aptitude had proven exceptional, but his academic performance had improved dramatically as well, driven by the confidence that came from mastering practical skills and earning community respect through consistent effort. "Mr. Monroe," Tommy said on this particular afternoon, emerging from underneath Mrs. Henderson's sedan with grease-stained hands and a satisfied expression, "I think I found the problem with her transmission. Want to check my diagnosis before I start the repair?" Jack reviewed Tommy's assessment, noting the careful reasoning and accurate identification of the mechanical issue. The teenager's progress had been remarkable from someone who'd caused harm through reckless choices to someone who approached every task with methodical precision and genuine care for quality. "Your diagnosis is exactly right," Jack confirmed. "Go ahead with the repair, but call me over when you're ready to reinstall the transmission band. I want to make sure you've got the torque specifications correct." Tommy nodded, returning to work with the focused attention that had become his trademark. Jack watched him for a moment, still sometimes amazed by the transformation that Restorative, justice, and patient mentorship had accomplished. The angry, guilt-ridden boy from the confession letter had evolved into a young man who took pride in fixing things rather than breaking them. Elena arrived home from her shift at the hospital, now working reduced hours that allowed her to be present for Lily's after-school activities and evening homework sessions. The transition from full-time nursing to part-time work, plus stepmother responsibilities, had been easier than she'd expected, partly because the work felt equally important, just different in scope and focus. "How was school today?" she asked Lily, who was working on a science project at the kitchen table while keeping one eye on Tommy's progress in the garage. "Really good. Mrs. Patterson said my essay about community healing was one of the best she's ever read, and I got to present it to the whole class." Elena felt a surge of pride in Lily's academic achievement, but more than that, she was moved by the subject matter her stepdaughter had chosen. The 8-year-old had written about how families and communities could recover from difficult events through forgiveness, understanding, and commitment to positive change. Her primary example had been Tommy's integration into their family and the broader Milbrook Harbor community. "What did your classmates think about your essay?" They asked a lot of questions about Tommy and how we decided to help him instead of just being mad at him. "I told them that being mad doesn't fix anything, but helping people learn to make better choices can fix a lot of things." Jack joined them in the kitchen, washing his hands at the sink while listening to Lily's account of her school presentation. Her ability to articulate complex ideas about justice and forgiveness continued to impress him, but he was most grateful for her emotional resilience and her capacity to find meaning in difficult experiences. "Did you tell them about the letters?" Elena asked, referring to the monthly correspondence that Tommy and Lily had maintained throughout his community service period. The letters had evolved from formal updates about his progress to genuine friendship, with Tommy sharing his thoughts about college plans and Lily describing her various school projects and extracurricular activities. I read them the letter where Tommy wrote about learning to change brake pads and how it made him think about how stopping safely is just as important as going fast. They thought that was really smart. Tommy appeared in the kitchen doorway, having finished his work for the day and cleaned up the tools with his usual care. "Did someone mention my letters? I hope you didn't read the one where I complained about algebra homework." Lily giggled. "I read the brake pad one. It was very philosophical." "Philosophical," Tommy repeated, grinning. "I like that. Maybe I should put that on my college applications. Philosophical mechanic." Elena watched the easy interaction between Tommy and Lily, noting how their relationship had developed into genuine sibling-like affection. Tommy's protective instincts toward Lily were evident in small gestures, making sure she stayed safely away from moving machinery in the garage, helping her with math problems that challenged her, bringing her small gifts when he'd had particularly successful days at work or school. "Speaking of college applications," Jack said, settling into his chair with a cup of coffee, "have you decided which schools you're most interested in?" Tommy's expression grew thoughtful. "I've been thinking about programs that combine mechanical engineering with community service. There's a state school that has a great automotive technology program, and they also have a volunteer program that teaches basic car maintenance to low-income families." Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at Tommy's career aspirations. His desire to use mechanical skills in service of community welfare represented the full completion of his personal transformation from someone who'd caused harm through mechanical means to someone who wanted to prevent harm through mechanical expertise. "That sounds perfect for you," she said. "Have you talked to your parents about the application process?" "My dad is really excited about the possibility of me being the first person in our family to go to college. My mom keeps crying every time. We talk about it, but in a good way." Jack nodded, understanding the pride that Carlos and Maria Vasquez felt in their son's academic achievements. The family had been through their own healing process, working to understand how their hardworking, responsible son had made such a devastating choice and then supporting his efforts to make amends. "You know," Jack said, "if you do go to that state school, you'll only be about 2 hours away. Close enough to come back and help in the garage during breaks, if you want to." Tommy's face lit up with pleasure at the suggestion. "I'd really like that, Mr. Monroe. This garage feels like family business now." Elena glanced at Jack, seeing the same emotion in his expression that she felt in her own heart. Tommy had indeed become family, not in the traditional sense, but in the way that really mattered, through choice, commitment, and mutual care developed over time. That evening, after Tommy had gone home and Lily was asleep, Jack and Elena sat on their front porch watching the harbor lights reflect on calm water. The November air was crisp, but not yet winter cold, perfect for the kind of quiet conversation that had become their favorite way to end busy days. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if your car hadn't broken down that morning?" Jack asked, his arm around Elena's shoulders as they shared the porch swing that had become their evening tradition. "Every day," Elena replied, "but not in a wishing it had been different way, more in a grateful for the path that led us here way." Jack nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The chain of events that had brought them together, Elena's urgent mission to save the president's wife, the car trouble that had required his help, Lily's accident that had put Elena in position to serve as their nurse, felt less like coincidence and more like a series of necessary steps that had led to this moment. "Sometimes I think Sarah would have liked the way everything worked out," Jack said quietly. "She always believed that difficult things happen for reasons we might not understand until later." Elena squeezed his hand, grateful for his ability to include Sarah's memory in their current happiness without sadness or guilt. "I think she would have loved watching Lily grow into such a wise, compassionate little girl. And I think she would have appreciated that her husband found someone who understood the importance of healing others." They sat in comfortable silence, watching fishing boats return from evening trips and listening to the eternal rhythm of waves against the harbor's stone barriers. This view had drawn Jack to Milbrook Harbor when he needed a place to heal from loss, and now it anchored a life rebuilt around love, community, and the daily choice to help others flourish. "Elena," Jack said, his voice carrying the tone that indicated important thoughts were forming, "what do you think about the idea of expanding our family?" Elena turned to look at him, reading multiple meanings in the carefully phrased question. "Are you asking about having another child?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'm asking about making our commitment to Tommy more official. He's been part of our family in every way that matters for almost a year now. His own parents have talked about how much stability our mentorship has provided." Elena considered this, thinking about Tommy's obvious comfort in their home and his genuine affection for Lily. "What would that look like?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe guardianship while he finishes high school and starts college. Maybe just a formal commitment to continue supporting his education and development. Something that acknowledges that he's not just a student or community service project anymore. He's family." Elena felt the rightness of the idea settle into her heart. Tommy had earned his place in their household through consistent effort and genuine growth. Formalizing that relationship would provide security for him while acknowledging the reality of bonds that had already formed. "I think that's a beautiful idea," she said. "And I think Lily would be thrilled to have Tommy as an official big brother." "And the other question? About expanding our family in more traditional ways?" Elena smiled, thinking about the changes that another child would bring to their carefully balanced household. I think I'd like that too. When the timing feels right, Lily would be an amazing big sister, and you're already such a good father. Jack kissed Elena softly, tasting the promise of continued growth and change in their family structure. They'd built something beautiful from the fragments of loss and trauma, but they were far from finished creating the life they wanted together. Inside the house, Lily slept peacefully in the room that had become her sanctuary, surrounded by drawings that showed their family in various configurations, sometimes 3 people, sometimes 4 when Tommy was included, sometimes with additional figures that might represent future siblings or extended family members. Her artistic vision had always been more expansive than the adults' planning, including possibilities that they were only beginning to imagine. The new family portrait on the mantel caught the moonlight, streaming through the living room windows, its silver frame reflecting the harbor lights visible through the glass. Beside it, Sarah's original family photo maintained its place of honor, both images telling parts of the same ongoing story love that endured through loss, families that expanded through choice, and the patient work of building happiness from the materials that life provided. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Tommy would submit his college applications, continuing his journey toward becoming the kind of man who solved problems rather than creating them. Lily would work on her next school project, probably something equally insightful about community, healing, or the way families could be formed through dedication rather than just biology. Elena would return to her nursing shifts, helping other families navigate medical crises with the wisdom that came from having survived their own. But tonight, sitting on the porch of the house that had become home to all of them, Jack and Elena understood that they'd accomplished something remarkable. They'd taken a chance on love despite complicated histories, chosen healing over hurt, and built a family that honored both past and future. The business card that had started their connection sat framed in their bedroom, a simple piece of white cardstock that had become the foundation for everything that followed. Elena Reyes, RN, Mercy General Hospital, the words that had introduced a stranger who became first a caregiver, then a friend, and finally the missing piece that made their family complete. In the distance, lighthouse beams swept across dark water, guiding boats safely to harbor with the same steady reliability that love provided for families willing to do the work of building something lasting together. The light would continue its rotation through the night, just as their commitment to each other would continue through whatever challenges and joys the future might hold.